The Tracer of Lost Persons by Chambers. Part 2. Chapter 13. Gatewood, in the telephone booth, waited impatiently for Mr. Keene, and after a few moments the Tracer of Lost Persons' agreeable voice sounded in the receiver. "It's about Mr. Kearns," began Gatewood. "I want to see him happy, and the idiot won't be. Now, Mr. Keene, you know what happiness you and he brought to me. You know what sort of an idle, selfish, aimless, meaningless life you saved me from. I want you to do the same for Mr. Kearns. I want to ask you to take up his case at once. Besides, I've a bet on it. Could you attend to it at once?" "Tonight?" asked the Tracer, laughing. "Why, well, of course, that would be impossible, I suppose. My profession is to overcome the impossible, Mr. Gatewood. Where is Mr. Kearns?" "Here, in this club, defying me and drinking cocktails. He won't get married, and I want you to make him do it." "Where is he spending the evening?" asked the Tracer, laughing again. "Why, he's been stopping at the Danforth Lees in 83rd Street until the workmen at the club here finish putting new paper on his walls. The Lees are out of town. He left his suitcase at their house and is going up to get it and catch the 12.10 train for Boston. He goes from the Lenox Club to the residence of Mr. W. Danforth Lee, East 83rd Street, to get his suitcase," repeated the Tracer. "Is that correct?" "Yes. What is in the suitcase?" "Samples of that new marble he's quarrying in Georgia." "Is it an old suitcase? Has it Mr. Kearns's initials on it?" "Hold the wire. I'll find out." And Gatewood left the telephone and walked into the great lounging room, where Kearns sat twirling his stick and smiling to himself. "All over, dear friend?" inquired Kearns, starting to rise. "I've ordered a corking dinner." "Wait," returned Gatewood ominously. "What sort of a suitcase is that one you're going after?" "What sort?" "Oh, just an ordinary." "Is it old on you?" "Brand new." "Why? Is your name on it?" "No." "Why? Would that thicken the plot, dear friend? Or is the Tracer foiled?" "Ha! Ha!" Gatewood turned on his heel, went back to the telephone, and, carefully shutting the door of the booth, took up the receiver. "It's a new suitcase, Mr. Keene," he said. "No initials on it. Just an ordinary case. Mr. Lee's residence is 38 East 83rd Street, between Madison and 5th, I believe." "Yes," replied Gatewood. "And the family are out of town?" "Yes." "Is there a caretaker there?" "No. Mr. Kearns camped there. When he leaves tonight he will send the key to the burglar alarm company." "Very well. Please hold the wire for a while." For 10 full minutes Gatewood sat gleefully cuddling the receiver against his ear. His faith in Mr. Keene was naturally boundless. He believed that whatever the Tracer attempted could not result in failure. He desired nothing in the world so ardently as to see Kearns safely married. His own happiness may have been the motive power which had set him in action in behalf of his friend. That and a certain indefinable desire to practice a species of heavenly revenge, of grateful retaliation upon the prime mover and collaborator, if not the sole author, of his own wedded bliss. Kearns had made him happy, and I'm hanged if I don't pay him off and make him happy, too," muttered Gatewood. "Does he think I'm going to sit still and see him go tearing and gyrating about town with no responsibility, no moral check to his evolutions, no wholesome home duties to limit his acrobatics, no wife to clip his wings? It's time he had somebody to report to. Time he assumed moral burdens and spiritual responsibilities. A man is just as happy when he is certain where he is going to sleep. A man can find just as much enjoyment in life when he feels it his duty to account for his movements. I don't care whether Kearns is comparatively happy or not. There's nothing either sacred or holy in that kind of happiness, and I'm not going to endure the sort of life he likes any longer." Immersed in moral reflections, inspired by affectionate obligations to violently inflict happiness upon Kearns, the minutes passed very agreeably until the amused voice of the Tracer of Lost Persons sounded again in the receiver. "Mr. Gatewood?" "Yes, I am here, Mr. Keene. Do you really think it best for Mr. Kearns to fall in love?" "I do, certainly," replied Gatewood with emphasis. "Because," continued the Tracer of Lost Persons, "I see little chance for him to do otherwise if I take up this case. Fate itself, in the shape of a young lady, is already on the way here in a railroad train." "Good, good," exclaimed Gatewood. "Don't let him escape, Mr. Keene. I beg of you to take up his case. I urge you most seriously to do so." Mr. Kearns is now exactly what I was a year ago, an utterly useless member of the community, a typical bachelor who lives at his clubs, shirking the duties of a decent citizen. Exactly, said the tracer. Do you insist that I take this case? That I attempt to trace and find for Mr. Kearns a sort of happiness he himself has never found? I implore you to do so, Mr. Keene. Exactly. If I carry it out as it has been arranged, or rather as the case seems to have already arranged itself, for it is rather a simple matter, I fancy, I do not exactly see how Mr. Kearns can avoid experiencing a tender sentiment for the very charming young lady whom I, and chance, have designed for him as a partner through life. Excellent. Splendid, shouted Gatewood through the telephone. Can I do anything to aid you in this? Yes, replied the tracer, laughing. If you can keep him amused for an hour or two before he goes after his suitcase, it might make it easier for me. This young lady is due to arrive in New York at 8 o'clock. A client of mine, coming to consult me. Her presence plays an important part in Mr. Kearns's future. I wish you to detain Mr. Kearns until she is ready to receive him. But of this he must know nothing. Goodbye, Mr. Gatewood. And would you be kind enough to present my compliments to Mrs. Gatewood? Indeed I will. We never can forget what you have done for us. Goodbye. Goodbye, Mr. Gatewood. Try to keep Mr. Kearns amused for 2 or 3 hours. Of course, if you can't do this, there are other methods I may employ. A dozen other plans already partly outlined in my mind. But the present plan, which accident and coincidence make so easy, is likely to work itself out to your entire satisfaction within a few hours. We are already weaving a web around Mr. Kearns. We already have taken exclusive charge of his future movements after he leaves the Lenox Club. I do not believe he can escape us, or his charming destiny. Good night. Gatewood, enchanted, hung up the receiver. Song broke softly from his lips as he started in search of Kearns. His step was springy, buoyant, sort of subdued and modest prance. Now, he said to himself, Tommy must take out his papers. The time is ended when he can issue letters of marque to himself, hoist sail, square away, and go cruising all over this metropolis at his own sweet will. Chapter 14. In the meanwhile, at the other end of the wire, Mr. Keene, the tracer of lost persons, was preparing to trace for Mr. Kearns, against that gentleman's will, the true happiness which Mr. Kearns had never been able to find for himself. He sat in his easy chair within the 4 walls of his own office, inspecting a line of people who stood before him on the carpet, forming a single and attentive rank. In this rank were 5 men, a policeman, a cab driver, an agent of the telephone company, an agent of the electric company, and a reformed burglar carrying a kit of his trade tools. The tracer of lost persons gazed at them, meditatively joining the tips of his thin fingers. I want the number on 36 East 83rd Street changed to number 38, and the number 38 replaced by number 36, he said to the policeman. I want it done at once. Get a glazier and go up there and have it finished in an hour. Mrs. Kenner, caretaker at number 36, is in my pay. She will not interfere. There is nobody in number 38. Mr. Kearns leaves there tonight and the burglar alarm company takes charge tomorrow. And, turning to the others, you, nodding at the reformed burglar, know your duty. Mike, to the cab driver, don't miss Mr. Kearns at the Lenox Club. If he calls you before 11, drive into the park and have an accident. And you, to the agent of the telephone company, will sever all telephone connection in Mrs. Stanley's house. And you, to the official of the electric company, will see that the circuit in Mrs. Stanley's house is cut so that no electric light may be lighted and no electric bell sound. The tracer of lost persons stroked his gray mustache thoughtfully. And that, he ended, will do, I think. Good night. He rose and stood by the door as the policeman headed the solemn file which marched out to their duty. Then he looked at his watch, and, as it was already a few minutes after 8, he called up number 36 East 83rd Street, and in a moment more had Mrs. Stanley on the wire. Good evening, he said pleasantly. I suppose you have just arrived from Rosalind. I may be a little late. I may be very late, in fact, so I called you up to say so. And I wish to say another thing, to ask you whether your servants could recollect ever having seen a young man about the place, a rather attractive young man with excellent address and manners, 5 feet 11 inches, slim but well built, dark hair, dark eyes, and dark mustache, offering samples of Georgia marble for sale. Really, Mr. Keene, replied a silvery voice, I have heard them say nothing about such an individual. If you will hold the wire, I will ask my maid. And, after a pause, no, Mr. Keene, my maid cannot remember any such person. Do you think he was a confederate of that wretched butler of mine? I am scarcely prepared to say that. In fact, added Mr. Keene, I haven't the slightest idea that this young man could have been concerned in anything of that sort. Only, if you should ever by any chance see such a man, detain him if possible until you can communicate with me. Detain him by any pretext, by ruse, by force if you can. Only detain him until I can get there. Will you do this? Certainly, Mr. Keene, if I can. Please describe him again. Mr. Keene did so minutely. You say he sells Georgia marble by samples, which he carries in a suitcase. He says that he has samples of Georgia marble in his suitcase, replied the tracer cautiously. It might be well, if possible, to see what he has in his suitcase. I will warn the servants as soon as I return to Rosalind. When may I expect you this evening, Mr. Keene? It is impossible to say, Mrs. Stanley. If I am not there by midnight, I shall try to call next morning. So they exchanged civil adieus. The tracer hung up his receiver and leaned back in his chair, smiling to himself. Curious, he said, that chance should have sent that pretty woman to me at such a time. Kearns is a fine fellow, every inch of him. It hit him hard when he crossed with her to Southampton 6 years ago. It hit him harder when she married that Englishman. I don't wonder he never cared to marry after that brief week of her society. For she is just about the most charming woman I have ever met, red hair and all. And if quick action is what is required, it's well to break the ice between them at once with a dreadful misunderstanding. Chapter 15. The dinner that Kearns had planned for himself and Gatewood was an ingenious one, cunningly contrived to discontent Gatewood with home fare and lure him by its seductive quality into frequent revisits to the club which was responsible for such delectable wines and viands. A genial glow already enveloped Gatewood and pleasantly suffused Kearns. From time to time they held some rare vintage aloft, squinting through the crystal-imprisoned crimson with deep content. Not that my word is necessarily the last word concerning Burgundy, said Gatewood modestly. But I venture to doubt that any club in America can match this bottle, Kearns. Now, Jack, wheedled Kearns, isn't it pleasant to dine here once in a while? Be frank, man. Look about at the other tables, at all the pleasant, familiar faces, the same fine fellows, bless 'em, the same smoky old ceiling, the same bum portraits of dead governors, the same old stag heads on the wall. Now, Jack, isn't it mighty pleasant? After all, be a gentleman and admit it. Why, yes, confessed Gatewood. It's all right for me once in a while, because I know that I am presently going back to my own home, a jolly lamplit room and the prettiest girl in Manhattan curled up in an armchair. You're fortunate, said Kearns shortly. And for the first time there remained no lurking mockery in his voice. For the first time his retort was tinged with bitterness. But the next instant his eyes glimmered with the same gay malice, and the unbelieving smile twitched at his clean-cut lips, and he raised his hand, touching the short ends of his mustache with that careless, amused cynicism which rather became him. All that you picture so entrancingly is forbidden the true believer, he said, and began to repeat. O weaver, weave the flowers of Ferragan into the fabric that thy birth began. Iris, narcissus, tulips cloudband tied, these thou shalt picture for the eye of man. Henna, Harati, and the Jeelam's tide. In Saraband and Surak be thy guide, and the red dye of Isfahan beside, the checkered Chinese fret of ancient gold. So heed the ban, old as the law is old, nor weave into thy warp the laughing face, nor limb, nor body, nor one line of grace, nor hint, nor tint, nor any veiled device of woman who is barred from paradise. A nice sentiment, said Gatewood hotly. Can't help it. You see, I'm forbidden to monkey with the eternal looms or weave the forbidden into the pattern of my life. Gatewood sat silent for a moment, then looked up at Kearns with something so closely akin to a grin that his friend became interested in its scarcely veiled significance, and grinned in reply. So you really expect that your friend, Mr. Keene, is going to marry me to somebody, Nolans Volans? Asked Kearns. I do. That's what I dream of. Tommy, my poor friend, dream on. I am. Tommy, you're lost. I mean, you as good as married now. You think so? I know it. There you sit, savoring your Burgundy, idling over a cigar, happy, carefree, fancy-free, at liberty, as you believe, to roam off anywhere at any time and continue the eternal hunt for pleasure. That's what you think. Huh? Tommy, I know better. That's not the sort of man I see sitting on the same chair where you are now sprawling in such content. I see a doomed man, already in the shadow of the altar, wasting his time unsuspiciously while chance comes whirling into the city behind a Long Island locomotive, and fate, the footman, sits outside ready to follow him, and destiny awaits him no matter what he does, what he desires, where he goes, wherever he turns tonight. Destiny awaits him at his journey's end. Very fine, said Kearns admiringly. Too bad it's due to the Burgundy. Never mind what my eloquence is due to, retorted Gatewood. The fact remains that this is probably your last bachelor dinner. Kearns, old fellow, here's to her. Bless her. I wish sincerely that we knew who she is and where to send those roses. Anyway, here's to the bride. He stood up very gravely and drank the toast. Then, reseating himself, tapped the empty glass gently against the table's edge until it broke. You are certainly doing your part well, said Kearns admiringly. Then he swallowed the remainder of his Burgundy and looked up at the club clock. 11, he said with regret. I've about time to go to 83rd Street, get my suitcase, and catch my train at 125th Street. To a servant he said, call a hansom, then rose and sauntered downstairs to the cloakroom, where presently both men stood, hatted and gloved, swinging their sticks. That was a fool bet you made, began Kearns. I'll release you, Jack. Sorry, but I must insist on holding you, replied Gatewood, laughing. You're going to your doom. Come on, I'll see you as far as the cab door. They walked out, and Kearns gave the cabby the street and number and entered the hansom. Now, said Gatewood, you're in for it. You're done for. You can't help yourself. I've won my 12-gauge trap gun already, and I'll have to set you up in table silver, anyway, so it's an even break. You're all in, Tommy. The tracer is on your trail. In the beginning of a flippant retort, Kearns experienced a curious sensation of hesitation. Something in Gatewood's earnestness, in his jeering assurance and delighted certainty, made him, for one moment, feel doubtful, even uncomfortable. What nonsense you talk, he said, recovering his equanimity. Nothing on earth can prevent me driving to 38 East 83rd Street, getting my luggage, and taking the Boston Express. Your tracer doesn't intend to stop my hansom and drag me into a cave, does he? You haven't put knockouts into that Burgundy, have you? Then what in the dickens are you laughing at? But Gatewood, on the sidewalk under the lamplight, was still laughing as Kearns drove away, for he had recognized in the cab driver a man he had seen in Mr. Kearns' office, and he knew that the tracer of lost persons had Kearns already well in hand. The hansom drove on through the summer darkness between rows of electric globes drooping like huge white moon flowers from their foliated bronze stalks, on up the splendid avenue, past the great brilliantly illuminated hotels, past the white cathedral, past clubs and churches and the palaces of the wealthy. On along the park wall edged by its double rows of elms under which shadowy forms moved, lovers strolling in couples. Pooh, sniffed Kearns. The whole world has gone love-mad, and I'm the only sane man left. But he leaned back in his cab and fell thinking of a thin girl with red hair and great gray eyes, a thin, frail creature, scarcely more than a child, who had held him for a week in a strange sorcery only to release him with a frightened smile, leaving her indelible impression upon his life forever. And, thinking, he looked up, realizing that the cab had stopped in East 83rd Street before one of a line of brownstone houses, all externally alike. Then he leaned out and saw that the house number was 38. That was the number of the Lees house. He descended, bade the cabman await him, and, producing his latchkey, started up the steps, whistling gaily. But he didn't require his key, for, as he reached the front door, he found, to his surprise and concern, that it swung partly open, just a mere crack. The mischief, he muttered. Could I have failed to close it? Could anybody have seen it and crept in? He entered the hallway hastily and pressed the electric knob. No light appeared in the sconces. What the deuce? He murmured. Something wrong with the switch. And he hurriedly lighted a match and peered into the darkness. By the vague glimmer of the burning match he could distinguish nothing. He listened intently, tried the electric switch again without success. The match burned his fingers and he dropped it, watching the last red spark die out in the darkness. Something about the shadowy hallway seemed unfamiliar. He went to the door, stepped out on the stoop, and looked up at the number on the transom. It was 38, no doubt about the house. Hesitating, he glanced around to see that his hansom was still there. It had disappeared. "What an idiot that cabman is," he exclaimed, intensely annoyed at the prospect of lugging his heavy suitcase to a Madison Avenue car and traveling with it to Harlem. He looked up and down the dimly lighted street. East, an electric car glided down Madison Avenue. West, the lights of Fifth Avenue glimmered against the dark foliage of the park. He stood a moment, angry at the desertion of his cabman, then turned and re-entered the dark hall, closing the door behind him. Up the staircase he felt his way to the first landing, and, lighting a match, looked for the electric button. Am I crazy? Or was there no electric button in this hall? He thought. The match burned low. He had to drop it. Perplexed, he struck another match and opened the door leading into the front room, and stood on the threshold a moment, looking about him at the linen-shrouded furniture and pictures. This front room, closed for the summer, he had not before entered, but he stepped in now, poking about for any possible intruder, lighting match after match. "I suppose I ought to go over this confounded house inch by inch," he murmured. What could have possessed me to leave the front door ajar this morning? For an instant he thought that perhaps Mrs. Nolan, the woman who came in the morning to make his bed, might have left the door open. But he knew that couldn't be so, because he always waited for her to finish her work and leave before he went out. So either he must have left the door open, or some marauder had visited the house, was perhaps at that moment in the house. And it was his duty to find out. I'd better be about it, too, he thought savagely, or I'll never make my train. He struck his last match, looked around, and, seeing gas jets among the clustered electric bulbs of the sconces, tried to light one and succeeded. He had left his suitcase in the passageway between the front and rear rooms, and now, cautiously, stick in hand, he turned toward the dim corridor leading to the bedroom. There was his suitcase, anyway. He picked it up and started to push open the door of the rear room. But at the same time, and before he could lay his hand on the knob, the door before him opened suddenly in a flood of light, and a woman stood there, dark against the gaslit glare, a pistol waveringly extended in the general direction of his head. Chapter 16. Good heavens, he said, appalled, and dropped his suitcase with a crash. What are you doing? She controlled her voice and the wavering weapon with an effort. What are you doing in this house? Doing? In this house, he repeated, his eyes protruding in the direction of the unsteady pistol muzzle. What are you doing in this house, if you don't mind saying? I must ask you to put up your hands, she said. If you move I shall certainly shoot off this pistol. It will go off, anyway, if you handle it like that, he said, exasperated. What do you mean by pointing it at me? I mean to fire it off in a few moments if you don't raise your hands above your head. He looked at the pistol. It was new and shiny. He looked at the athletic young figure silhouetted against the brilliant light. Well, if you make a point of it, of course. He slowly held up both hands, higher, then higher still. Upon my word, he breathed. Held up by a woman. And he said aloud, bitterly, no doubt you have assistance close at hand. No doubt, she said coolly. What have you been packing into that valise? Packing into what? Oh, into that suitcase? That is my suitcase. Of course it is, she said quietly. But what have you inside it? Nothing you or your friends would care for, he said meaningly. I must be the judge of that, she retorted. Please open that suitcase. How can I if my hands are in the air? He expostulated, now intensely interested in the novelty of being held up by this graceful and vaguely pretty silhouette. You may lower your arms to unpack the suitcase, she said. I had rather not if you are going to keep me covered with your pistol. Of course I shall keep you covered. Unpack your booty at once. My, what? Booty? Madam, do you take me for a thief? Have you, by chance, entered the wrong house? I cannot reconcile your voice with what I am forced to consider you, a housebreaker. We will discuss that later. Unpack that bag, she insisted. But there is nothing in it except samples of marble. What? She exclaimed nervously. What did you say? Samples of marble. Marble? Madam. Georgia marble. Oh, so you are the young man who goes about pretending to peddle Georgia marble from samples. Are you? The famous marble man I have heard of? I? Madam, I don't know what you mean. Come, she said scornfully. Let me see the contents of that suitcase. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not a bit afraid of you. And I shall catch your accomplice, too. Madam, you speak like an honest woman. You must have managed to enter the wrong house. This is number 38, where I live. It is number 36, my house. But I know it is number 38, Mr. Lee's house, he protested hopefully. This is some dreadful mistake. Mr. Lee's house is next door, she said. Do you not suppose I know my own house? Besides, I have been warned against a plausible young man who pretends he has Georgia marble to sell. There is a dreadful mistake somewhere, he insisted. Please put up your pistol and aid me to solve it. I am no robber, madam. I thought at first that you were. I'm living in Mr. Lee's house, number 38 East 83rd Street, and I've looked carefully at the number over the door of this house, and the number is 38, and the street is East 83rd. So I naturally conclude that I am in Mr. Lee's house. Your arguments and your conclusions are very plausible, she said. But, fortunately for me, I have been expressly warned against a young man of your description. You are the marble man. It's a mistake. A very dreadful one. Then how did you enter this house? I have a key. I found the front door unlatched. Please don't misunderstand me. I know it sounds unconvincing, but I really have a key to number 38. He attempted to reach for his pocket and the pistol glittered in his face. Won't you let me prove my innocence? He asked. You can't prove it by showing me a key. Besides, it's probably a weapon. Anyhow, if, as you pretend, you have managed to get into the wrong house, why did you bring that suitcase up here? It was here. It's mine. I left it here in this passageway. In my house? She asked incredulously. In number 38. That is all I know. I'll open the suitcase if you will let me. I have already described its contents. If it has samples of marble in it, you must be convinced. It will convince me that it is your valise. But what of that? I know it is yours already, she said defiantly. I know, at least, that you are the marble man, if nothing worse. But malefactors don't go about carrying samples of Georgia marble, he protested, dropping on one knee under the muzzle of her revolver and tugging at the straps and buckles. In a second or two he threw open the case, and the sight of the contents staggered him. For there, thrown in pell-mell among small square blocks of polished marble, was a complete kit of burglar's tools, including also a mask, a dark lantern, and a blackjack. What on earth is this? He stammered. These things don't belong to me. I won't have them. I don't want them. Who put them into my suitcase? How the deuce? You are the marble man, she said with a shudder. Your crimes are known. Your wretched accomplice will be caught. You are the marble man, or something worse. Kneeling there, aghast, bewildered, he passed his hand across his eyes as though to clear them from some terrible vision. But the suitcase was still there with its incriminating contents when he looked again. I am sorry for you, she said tremulously. If it were not for the marble, I would let you go. But you are the marble man. Yes, and I'm probably a madman, too. I don't know what I am. I don't know what is happening to me. I ought to be going. That is all I know. I cannot let you go, but I must. I've got to catch a train. The feebleness of his excuse chilled her pity. I shall not let you go, she said, resting the hand which held the pistol on her hip, but keeping him covered. I know you came to rob my house. I know you are a thoroughly bad and depraved young man. But for all that I could find it in my heart to let you go if you were not also the marble man. What on earth is the marble man? He asked, exasperated. I don't know. I have been earnestly warned against him. Probably he is a relative of my butler. I'm not a relative of anybody's butler. You say you are not. How do I know? I will make you an offer. I will give you one last chance. If you will return to me the jewels that my butler took. Good heavens, madam, do you really take me for a professional burglar? How can I help it? She said indignantly. Look at your suitcase full of lanterns and masks. Full of marble, too. Speechless, he stared at the burglar's kit. I am sorry. Her voice had altered again to a tremulous sweetness. I can't help feeling sorry for you. You do not seem to be hardened. Your voice and manner are not characteristically criminal. I can't see your face very clearly, but it does not seem to be a brutally inhuman face. An awful desire to laugh seized Kearns. He struggled against it, hysteria lay that way, and he covered his face with both hands and pinched himself. She probably mistook the action for the emotion of shame and despair born of bitter grief, perhaps of terror of the law. It frightened her a little, but pity dominated. She could scarcely endure to do what she must do. "This is dreadful, dreadful," she faltered. "If you only would give me back my jewels." Sounds, hastily smothered, escaped him. She believed them to be groans, and it made her slightly faint. I've simply got to telephone for the police," she said pityingly. "I must ask you to sit down there and wait. There is a chair. Sit there, and please don't move, this has unnerved me. I am not accustomed to doing cruel things, and if you should move too quickly or attempt to run away, I feel certain that this pistol would explode." "Are you going to telephone?" he asked. "Yes, I am." She backed away, cautiously, pistol menacing him, reached for the receiver, and waited for Central. She waited a long time before she realized that the telephone as well as the electric light was out of commission. "Did you cut all these wires?" she demanded angrily. What wires?" She reached out and pressed the electric button, which should have rung a bell in her maid's bedroom on the top floor. She kept her finger on the button for 10 minutes. It was useless. "You laid deliberate plans to rob this house," she said, her cheeks pink with indignation. "I'm not a bit sorry for you. I shall not let you go. I shall sit here until somebody comes to my assistance, if I have to sit here for weeks and weeks." "If you'd let me telephone to my club," he began. "Your club? You are very plausible. You didn't offer to call up any club until you found that the telephone was not working." He thought a moment. "I don't suppose you would trust me to go out and get a policeman." "Certainly not. Or go into the front room and open a window and summon some passerby. How do I know you haven't Confederates waiting outside?" "That's true," he said seriously. There was a silence. Her nerves seemed to trouble her, for she began to pace to and fro in front of the passageway where he sat comfortably on his chair, arms folded, one knee dropped over the other. The light being behind her, he could not as yet distinguish her features very clearly. Her figure was youthful, slender, yet beautifully rounded, her head charming in contour. He watched her restlessly walking on the floor, small hand clutching the pistol resting on her hip. The ruddy burnished glimmer on the edges of her hair, he supposed, at first, was caused by the strong light behind her. "This is atrocious," she murmured, halting to confront him. "How dared you sever every electric connection in my house?" As she spoke, she stepped backward a pace or two, resting herself for a moment against the footboard of the bed, full in the gaslight. And he saw her face. For a moment he studied her. An immense wave of incredulity swept over him, of wild unbelief, slowly changing to the astonishment of dawning conviction. Astounded, silent, he stared at her from his shadowy corner. And after a while his pulses began to throb and hammer, and the clamoring confusion of his senses seemed to deafen him. She rested a moment or two against the footboard of the bed, her big gray eyes fixed on his vague and shadowy form. "This won't do," she said. "No," he said, "it won't do." He spoke very quietly, very gently. She detected the alteration in his voice and started slightly, as though the distant echo of a familiar voice had sounded. "What did you say?" she asked, coming nearer, pistol glittering in advance. "I said it won't do. I don't know what I meant by it. If I meant anything, I was wrong. It will do. The situation is perfectly agreeable to me." "Insolence will not help you," she said sharply. And under the sharpness he detected the slightest quaver of a new alarm. "I'm going to free myself," he said coolly. "If you move, I shall certainly shoot," she retorted. "I'm going to move, but only my lips. I have only to move my lips to free myself. I should scarcely advise you to trust to your eloquence. I have been duly warned, you see." "Who warned you?" he asked curiously. And, as she disdained to reply, "Never mind. We can clear that up later. Now let me ask you something." "You are scarcely in a position to ask questions," she said. "May I not speak to you? Is it necessary?" He thought a moment. "No, not necessary. Nothing is in this life, you know. I thought differently once. Once, when I was younger, 6 years younger, I thought happiness was necessary. I found that a man might live without it." She stood gazing at him through the shadows, pistol on hip. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean that happiness is not necessary to life. Life goes on all the same. My life has continued for 6 years without that happiness which some believe to be essential. After a silence she said, I can tell by the way you speak that you are well born. I dread to do what I simply must do. He, too, sat silent a long time, long enough for an utterly perverse and whimsical humor to take complete possession of him. Won't you let me go, this time? He pleaded. I cannot. You had better let me go while you can, he said, because, perhaps, you may find it difficult to get rid of me later. Affronted, she shrank back from the doorway and stood in the center of her room, angry, disdainful, beautiful, under the ruddy glory of her lustrous hair. His perverse mood changed, too. He leaned forward, studying her minutely. The splendid gray eyes, the delicate mouth and nose, the full, sweet lips, the witchery of wrist and hand, and the flowing, rounded outline of limb and body under the pretty gown. Could this be she? This lovely, mature woman, wearing scarcely a trace of the young girl he had never forgotten, scarcely a trace save in the beauty of her eyes and hair, save in the full, red mouth, sweet and sensitive even in its sudden sullenness. Once, he said, and his voice sounded to him like voices heard in dreams. Once, years and years ago, there was a steamer and a man and a young girl on board. Do you mind my telling you about it? She stood leaning against the footboard of the bed, not even deigning to raise her eyes in reply. So he made the slightest stir in his chair, and then she looked up quickly enough, pistol poised. The steamer, said Kern slowly, was coming into Southampton 6 years ago. On deck these two people stood, a man of 28, a girl of 18, 6 years ago. The name of the steamer was the Carnatic. Did you ever hear of that ship? She was looking at him attentively. He waited for her reply. She made none, and he went on. The man had asked the girl something. I don't know what. I don't know why her gray eyes filled with tears. Perhaps it was because she could not do what the man asked her to do. It may have been to love him. It may have been that he was asking her to marry him and that she couldn't. Perhaps that is why there were tears in her eyes, because she may have been sorry to cause him the pain of refusal. Sorry, perhaps a little guilty. Because she must have seen that he was falling in love with her. And she let him, knowing all the time that she was to marry another man. Did you ever hear of that man before? She had straightened up, quivering, wide-eyed, lips parted. He rose and walked slowly into her room, confronting her under the full glare of light. Her pistol fell clattering to the floor. It did not explode because it was not loaded. Now, he said unsteadily, will you give me my freedom? I have waited for it, not minutes, but years, 6 years. I ask it now. The freedom I enjoyed before I ever saw you. Can you give it back to me? Can you restore to me a capacity for happiness? Can you give me a heart to love with? Love some woman, as other men love? Is it very much I ask of you, to give me a chance in life, the chance I had before I ever saw you? Her big gray eyes seemed fascinated. He looked deep into them, smiling, and she turned white. Will you give me what I ask? He said, still smiling. She strove to speak. She could not, but her eyes never faltered. Suddenly the color flooded her neck and cheeks to the hair, and the quick tears glimmered. I did not understand. I was too young to be cruel, she faltered. How could I know what I was doing? Or what you did? To you? Why, yes. Did you think that I escaped heart-free? Do you realize what my punishment was? To marry. And remember, if I was too young, too inexperienced to know what I was doing, I was not too young to suffer for it. You mean? He strove to control his voice, but the sweet, fearless gray eyes met his. The old flame leaped in his veins. He reached out to steady himself and his hand touched hers, that soft, white hand that had held him all these years in the hollow of its palm. Did you ever love me? He demanded. Her eyes, wet with tears, met his straight as the starry gaze of a child. Yes, she said. His hand tightened over hers. She swayed a moment, quivering from head to foot, then drawing a quick, sobbing breath, closed her eyes, imprisoned in his arms. And, after a long while, aroused, she looked up at him, her divine eyes unclosing dreamily. Somebody is hammering at the front door, he breathed. Listen. I hear. I believe it must be the tracer of lost persons. What? Only a Mr. Keene. Oh Lord, said Kearns faintly, and covered his face with her fragrant hands. Very tenderly, very gravely, she drew her hands away, and, laying them on his shoulders, looked up at him. You know what there is in your suitcase," she faltered. "Are you a burglar, dear?" "Ask the tracer of lost persons," said Kearns gently, "what sort of a criminal I am." They stood together for one blissful moment listening to the loud knocking below. Then, hand in hand, they descended the dark stairway to admit the tracer of lost persons. Chapter 17. On the 13th day of March, 1906, Kearns received the following cable from an old friend. "Is there anybody in New York who can find 2 criminals for me? I don't want to call in the police. J.T. Burke." To which Kearns replied promptly, "Wire Keene, tracer of lost persons, N1. And a day or two later, being on his honeymoon, he forgot all about his old friend Jack Burke. On the 15th day of March, 1906, Mr. Keene, tracer of lost persons, received the following cablegram from Alexandria, Egypt. Keene, tracer, New York. Locate Joram Smiles, 40, stout, lame, red hair, ragged red mustache, cast in left eye, pallid skin, carries 1 crutch, supposed to have arrived in America per S. Queen, with man known as Emmanuel Gandon, swarthy, short, fat, light bluish eyes, Eurasian type. I will call on you at your office as soon as my steamer, Empress of Babylon, arrives. If you discover my men, keep them under surveillance, but on no account call in police. Spare no expense. Dundas, Gray & Company are my bankers and referents. John Templeton Burke." On Monday, April 2d, a few minutes after 8 o'clock in the morning, the card of Mr. John Templeton Burke was brought to Mr. Keene, tracer of lost persons, and a moment later a well-built, wiry, sun-scorched young man was ushered into Mr. Keene's private office by a stenographer prepared to take minutes of the interview. The first thing that the tracer of lost persons noted in his visitor was his mouth, the next his eyes. Both were unmistakably good. The eyes which his creator had given him looked people squarely in the face at every word. The mouth, which a man's own character fashions agreeably or mars, was pleasant, but firm when the trace of the smile lurking in the corners died out. There were dozens of other external characteristics which Mr. Keene always looked for in his clients. And now the rapid exchange of preliminary glances appeared to satisfy both men, for they advanced toward each other and exchanged a formal hand clasp. "Have you any news for me?" asked Burke. "I have," said the tracer. "There are cigars on the table beside you? Matches in that silver case?" "No, I never smoke, but I like the aroma, and I like to watch men smoke." "Do you know, Mr. Burke, that no 2 men smoke in the same fashion? There is as much character in the manner of holding a cigar as there is difference in the technique of artists." Burke nodded, amused, but, catching sight of the busy stenographer, his bronzed features became serious, and he looked at Mr. Keene inquiringly. "It is my custom," said the tracer. "Do you object to my stenographer?" Burke looked at the slim young girl in her black gown and white collar and cuffs. Then, very simply, he asked her pardon for objecting to her presence, but said that he could not discuss his case if she remained. So she rose, with a humorous glance at Mr. Keene, and the 2 men stood up until she had vanished, then reseated themselves vis-a-vis. Mr. Keene calmly dropped his elbow on the concealed button which prepared a hidden phonograph for the reception of every word that passed between them. "What news have you for me, Mr. Keene?" asked the younger man with that same directness which the tracer had already been prepared for, and which only corroborated the frankness of eyes and voice. "My news is brief," he said. "I have both your men under observation." "Already?" exclaimed Burke, plainly unprepared. "Do you actually mean that I can see these men whenever I desire to do so? Are these scoundrels in this town, within pistol shot?" His youthful face hardened as he snapped out his last word, like the crack of a whip. "I don't know how far your pistol carries," said Mr. Keene. "Do you wish to swear out a warrant?" "No, I do not. I merely wish their addresses." "You have not used the police in this matter, have you, Mr. Keene?" "No. Your cable was explicit," said the tracer. "Had you permitted me to use the police, it would have been much less expensive for you." "I can't help that," said the young man. "Besides, in a matter of this sort, a man cannot decently consider expense." "A matter of what sort?" asked the tracer blandly. "Of this sort." "Oh, yet even now I do not understand. You must remember, Mr. Burke, that you have not told me anything concerning the reasons for your quest of these two men, Joram Smiles and Emmanuel Gandon. Besides, this is the first time you have mentioned pistol range. Burke, smoking steadily, looked at the tracer through the blue fog of his cigar. No, he said, I have not told you anything about them. Mr. Keene waited a moment. Then, smiling quietly to himself, he wrote down the present addresses of Joram Smiles and Emmanuel Gandon, and, tearing off the leaf, handed it to the younger man, saying, I omit the pistol range, Mr. Burke. I am very grateful to you, said Burke. The efficiency of your system is too famous for me to venture to praise it. All I can say is thank you. All I can do in gratitude is to write my check, if you will be kind enough to suggest the figures. Are you sure that my services are ended? Thank you. Quite sure. So the tracer of lost persons named the figures, and his client produced a checkbook and filled in a check for the amount. This was presented and received with pleasant formality. Burke rose, prepared to take his leave. But the tracer was apparently busy with the combination lock of a safe, and the young man lingered a moment to make his adieus. As he stood waiting for the tracer to turn around, he studied the writing on the sheet of paper which he held toward the light. Joram Smiles, no profession, 613, West 24th Street. Emmanuel Gandon, no profession, same address. Very dangerous men. It occurred to him that these 3 lines of pencil writing had cost him $1,000, and at the same instant he flushed with shame at the idea of measuring the money value of anything in such a quest as this. And yet he had already spent a great deal of money in his brief quest. And was he any nearer the goal, even with the penciled addresses of these 2 men in his possession? Even with these men almost within pistol shot? Pondering there, immersed in frowning retrospection, the room, the tracer, the city seemed to fade from his view. He saw the red sand blowing in the desert. He heard the sickly squealing of camels at the El Teb wells. He saw the sun strike fire from the rippling waters of Sayis. He saw the plain and the ruins high above it. And the odor of the long bazaar smote him like a blow, and he heard the far call to prayer from the minarets of Salhagar. Once Sayis, the mysterious, Sayis of the million lanterns, Sayis of that splendid festival where the great triads worship swayed dynasty after dynasty, and where, through the hot centuries, Isis, veiled, impassive, looked out upon the hundreds king of kings, Meres, the builder of gardens, dragged dead at the chariot of Upper and Lower Egypt. Slowly the visions faded. Into his remote eyes crept the consciousness of the 20th century again. He heard the river whistles blowing, and the far dissonance of the streets, that iron undertone vibrating through the metropolis of the West from river to river and from the Palisades to the sea. His gaze wandered about the room, from telephone desk to bookcase, from the table to the huge steel safe. Door ajar, swung outward like the polished breech of a 12-inch gun. Then his vacant eyes met the eyes of the tracer of lost persons, almost helplessly. And for the first time the full significance of this quest he had undertaken came over him like despair. This strange, hopeless, fantastic quest, blindly, savagely pursued from the sand wastes of Sayis to the wastes of this vast arid city of iron and masonry, ringing to the sky with a menacing clamor of its 5 monstrous boroughs. Curiously weary of a sudden, he sat down, resting his head on one hand. The tracer watched him, bent partly over his desk. From moment to moment he tore minute pieces from the blotter, or drew imaginary circles and arabesques on his pad with an inkless pen. Perhaps I could help you, after all, if you'd let me try, he said quietly. Do you mean me? Asked Burke, without raising his head. If you like, yes, you, or any man in trouble, in perplexity, in the uncertain deductions which arise from an attempt at self-analysis. It is true. I'm trying to analyze myself. I believe that I don't know how. All has been mere impulse, so far. No, I don't know how to analyze it all. I do, said the tracer. Burke raised his level, unbelieving eyes. You are in love, said the tracer. After a long time Burke looked up again. Do you think so? Yes. Can I help you? Asked the tracer pleasantly. The young man sat silent, frowning into space. Then, I tell you plainly enough that I have come here to argue with 2 men at the end of a pistol. And you tell me I'm in love. By what logic? It is written in your face, Mr. Burke, in your eyes, in every feature, every muscle's contraction, every modulation of your voice. My tables, containing 600 classified superficial phenomena peculiar to all human emotions, have been compiled and scientifically arranged according to Botillin's system. It is an absolutely accurate key to every phase of human emotion, from hate, through all its amazingly paradoxical phenomena, to love, with all its genera under the suborder, all its species, subspecies, and varieties. He leaned back, surveying the young man with kindly amusement. You talk of pistol range, but you are thinking of something more fatal than bullets, Mr. Burke. You are thinking of love, of the first, great, absorbing, unreasoning passion that has ever shaken you, blinded you, seized you, and dragged you out of the ordered path of life, to push you violently into the strange and unexplored. That is what stares out on the world through those haunted eyes of yours, when the smile dies out and you are off your guard. That is what is hardening those flat, clean bands of muscle in jaw and cheek. That is what those hints of shadow mean beneath the eye, that new and delicate pinch to the nostril, that refining, almost to sharpness, of the nose, that sensitive edging to the lips, and the lean delicacy of the chin. He bent slightly forward in his chair. There is all that there, Mr. Burke, and something else, the glimmering dawn of desperation. Yes, said the other, that is there. I am desperate. Exactly. Also you wear 2 revolvers in a light, leather harness strapped up under your armpits, said the tracer, laughing. Take them off, Mr. Burke. There is nothing to be gained in shooting up Mr. Smiles or converting Mr. Gandon into nitrates. If it is a matter where one man can help another, the tracer added simply, it would give me pleasure to place my resources at your command, without recompense. Mr. Keene, said Burke, astonished. Yes, you are very amiable. I had not expected anything except professional interest from you. Why not? I like you, Mr. Burke. Why not? I like you, Mr. Burke. The utter disarming candor of this quiet, elderly gentleman silenced the younger man with a suddenness born of emotions long crushed, long relentlessly mastered, and which now, in revolt, shook him fiercely in every fiber. All at once he felt very young, very helpless in the world, that same world through which, until within a few weeks, he had roved so confidently, so arrogantly, challenging man and the gods themselves in the pride of his strength and youth. But now, halting, bewildered, lost amid the strange maze of byways whither impulse had lured and abandoned him, he looked out into a world of wilderness and unfamiliar stars and shadow shapes undreamed of, and he knew not which way to turn, not even how to return along the ways his impetuous feet had trodden in this strange and hopeless quest of his. How can you help me? He said bluntly, while the quivering undertone rang in spite of him. Yes, I am in love, but how can any living man help me? Are you in love with the dead? Asked the tracer gravely. For that only is hopeless. Are you in love with one who is not living? Yes. You love one whom you know to be dead. Yes, dead. How do you know that she is dead? That is not the question. I knew that when I fell in love with her. It is not that which appalls me. I ask nothing more than to live my life out loving the dead. I ask very little. He passed his unsteady hand across his dry lips, across his eyes and forehead, then laid his clenched fist on the table. Some men remain constant to a memory, some to a picture, sane, wholesome, normal men. Some men, with a fixed ideal, never encounter its facsimile, and so never love. There is nothing strange, after all, in this, nothing abnormal, nothing unwholesome. Grunwald loved the marble head and shoulders of the lovely Amazon in the Munich Museum. He died unmarried, leaving the charities and good deeds of a blameless life to justify him. Sir Henry Guest, the great surgeon who worked among the poor without recompense, loved Gainsborough's Lady Wilton. The portrait hangs above his tomb in St. Clement's Hundreds. D'Epinay loved Mademoiselle Jean Vacaresco, who died before he was born. And I love in my own fashion. His low voice rang with a repressed undertone of excitement. He opened and closed his clenched hand as though controlling the lever of his emotions. What can you do for a man who loves the shadow of life? He asked. If you love the shadow because the substance has passed away, if you love the soul because the dust has returned to the earth as it was. It has not, said the younger man. The tracer said very gravely. It is written that whenever the silver cord is loosed, then shall the dust return unto the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto him who gave it. The spirit. Yes, that has taken its splendid flight. His voice choked up, died out. He strove to speak again, but could not. The tracer let him alone, and bent again over his desk, drawing imaginary circles on the stained blotter, while moment after moment passed under the tension of that fiercest of all struggles, when a man sits throttling his own soul into silence. And, after a long time, Burke lifted a haggard face from the cradle of his crossed arms and shook his shoulders, drawing a deep, steady breath. "Listen to me," he said in an altered voice, and the tracer of lost persons nodded. Chapter 18. When I left the point, I was assigned to the colored cavalry. They are good men. We went up Kettle Hill together. Then came the Philippine troubles, then that Chinese affair. Then I did staff duty, and could not stand the inactivity and resigned. They had no use for me in Manchuria. I tired of waiting, and went to Venezuela. The prospects for service there were absurd. I heard of the Moorish troubles and went to Morocco. Others of my sort swarmed there. Matters dragged, and the Kaiser never meant business, anyway. Being independent, and my means permitting me, I got some shooting in the back country. This all degenerated into the merest nomadic wandering. Nothing but sand, camels, ruins, tents, white walls, and blue skies. And at last I came to the town of Salhagar. His voice died out. His restless, haunted eyes became fixed. Salhagar, once ancient Sayas, repeated the tracer quietly, and the young man looked at him. "You know that?" "Yes," said the tracer. For a while Burke remained silent, preoccupied. Then, resting his chin on his hand and speaking in a curiously monotonous voice, as though repeating to himself by rote, he went on. "The town is on the heights. Have you a pencil?" "Thank you. Here is the town of Salhagar. Here are the ruins. Here is the wall. And somewhere hereabouts should be the buried temple of Neith, which nobody has found." He shifted his pencil. "Here is the lake of Sayas. Here, standing all alone on the plain, are those great monolithic pillars stretching away into perspective, 400 of them in all, 109 still upright. There were 110 when I arrived at El Teb Wells." He looked across at the tracer, repeating, 110, when I arrived. One fell the first night, a distant pillar far away on the horizon. 4,000 years had it stood there, and it fell, the first night of my arrival. I heard it. The nights are cold at El Teb Wells, and I was lying awake, all a shiver, counting the stars to make me sleep. And very, very far away in the desert I heard and felt the shock of its fall, the fall of 40 centuries under the Egyptian stars. His eyes grew dreamy. A slight glow had stained his face. "Did you ever halt suddenly in the northern forests, listening, as though a distant voice had hailed you? Then you understand why that far, dull sound from the dark horizon brought me to my feet, bewildered, listening, as though my own name had been spoken. I heard the wind in the tents and the stir of camels. I heard the reeds whispering on Sayas Lake and the yap-yap of a shivering jackal. And always, the hushed echo in my ears of my own name called across the starlit waste. At dawn I had forgotten. An Arab told me that a pillar had fallen. It was all the same to me, to him, to the others, too. The sun came out hot. I like heat. My men sprawled in the tents. Some watered. Some went up to the town to gossip in the bazaar. I mounted and cast bridle on neck. You see how much I cared where I went. In 2 hours we had completed a circle, like a ruddy hawk above El Teb. And my horse halted beside the fallen pillar. As he spoke, his language had become very simple, very direct, almost without accent. And he spoke slowly, picking his way with that lack of inflection, of emotion characteristic of a child reading a new reader. The column had fallen from its base, eastward, and with its base it had upheaved another buried base, laying bare a sort of cellar and a flight of stone steps descending into darkness. Into this excavation the sand was still running in tiny rivulets. Listening, I could hear it pattering far, far down into the shadows. Sitting there in the saddle, the thing explained itself as I looked. The fallen pillar had been built upon older ruins. All Egypt is that way, ruin founded on the ruin of ruins, like human hopes. The stone steps, descending into the shadow of remote ages, invited me. I dismounted, walked to the edge of the excavation, and, kneeling, peered downward. And I saw a wall and the lotus-carved rim of a vast stone-framed pool, and as I looked I heard the tinkle of water. For the pillar, falling, had unbottled the ancient spring, and now the stone-framed lagoon was slowly filling after its drought of centuries. There was light enough to see by, but, not knowing how far I might penetrate, I returned to my horse, pocketed matches and candles from the saddlebags, and, returning, started straight down the steps of stone. Fountain, wall, lagoon, steps, terraces half buried, all showed what the place had been, a water garden of ancient Egypt, probably royal, because, although I am not able to decipher hieroglyphics, I have heard somewhere that these picture inscriptions, when enclosed in a cartouche like this, he drew rapidly, or this, indicate that the subject of the inscription was once a king. And on every wall, every column, I saw the insignia of ancient royalty, and I saw strange hawk-headed figures bearing symbols engraved on stone, beasts, birds, fishes, unknown signs and symbols. And everywhere the lotus carved in stone, the bud, the blossom half enclosed, the perfect flower. His dreamy eyes met the gaze of the tracer, unseeing. He rested his sunburned face between both palms, speaking in the same vague monotone. Everywhere dust, ashes, decay, the death of life, the utter annihilation of the living, save only the sparkle of reborn waters slowly covering the baked bed of the stone-edge pool. Strange, luminous water, lacking the vital sky tint, enameled with a film of dust, yet, for all that, quickening with imprisoned brilliancy like an opal. The slow filling of the pool fascinated me. I stood I know not how long watching the thin film of water spreading away into the dimness beyond. At last I turned and passed curiously along the wall where, at its base, mounds of dust marked what may have been trees. Into these I probed with my riding crop, but discovered nothing except the depths of the dust. When I had penetrated the ghost of this ancient garden for 1,000 yards, the light from the opening was no longer of any service. I lighted a candle, and its yellow rays fell upon a square portal into which led another flight of steps. And I went down. There were 18 steps descending into a square stone room. Strange gleams and glimmers from wall and ceiling flashed dimly in my eyes under the wavering flame of the candle. Then the flame grew still, still as death, and death lay at my feet. There on the stone floor, a man, square-shouldered, hairless, the cobwebs of his tunic mantling him, lying face downward, arms outflung. After a moment I stooped and touched him, and the entire prostrate figure dissolved into dust where it lay, leaving at my feet a shadow shape in thin silhouette against the pavement. Merely a grey layer of finest dust shaped like a man, a tracery of impalpable powder on the stones. Upward and around me I passed the burning candle. Vast figures in blue and red and gold grew out of the darkness. The painted walls sparkled. The shadows that had slept through all those centuries trembled and shrank away into distant corners. And then I saw the gold edges of a sandal sparkle in the darkness, and the clasped girdle of virgin gold around her slender waist glimmered like purest flame. Burke, leaning far across the table, interlocked hands tightening, stared and stared into space. A smile edged his mouth. His voice grew wonderfully gentle. Why, she was scarcely 18. This child. They're so motionless, so lifelike, with the sandals edging her little upturned feet and the small hands of her folded between the breasts. It was as though she had just stretched herself out there, scarcely sound asleep as yet, and her thick, silky hair, cut as they cut children's hair in these days, cradled her head and cheeks. So marvelous the mimicry of life, so absolute the deception of breathing sleep, that I scarce dared move, fearing to awaken her. When I did move, I forgot the dusty shape of the dead at my feet, and left, full across his neck, the imprint of a spurred riding boot. It gave me my first shudder. I turned, feeling beneath my foot the soft, yielding powder, and stood aghast. Then, it is absurd, but I felt as a man feels who has trodden inadvertently upon another's foot, and in an impulse of reparation I stooped hastily and attempted to smooth out the mortal dust which bore the imprint of my heel. But the fine powder flaked my glove, and, looking about for something to compose the ashes with, I picked up a papyrus scroll. Perhaps he himself had written on it. Nobody can ever know, and I used it as a sort of hoe to scrape him together and smooth him out on the stones. The young man drew a yellowish roll of paper-like substance from his pocket and laid it on the table. "This is the same papyrus," he said. I had forgotten that I carried it away with me until I found it in my shooting coat while packing to sail for New York. The tracer of lost persons reached over and picked up the scroll. It was flexible still, but brittle. He opened it with great care, considered the strange figures upon it for a while, then turned almost sharply on his visitor. "Go on," he said. And Burke went on. The candle was burning low. I lighted 2 more, placing them at her head and feet on the edges of the stone couch. Then, lighting a 3rd candle, I stood beside the couch and looked down at the dead girl under her veil-like robe, set with golden stars. He passed his hand wearily over his hair and forehead. I do not know what the accepted meaning of beauty may be if it was not there under my eyes. Flawless as palest amber, ivory, and rose, the smooth-flowing contours melted into exquisite symmetry. Lashes like darkest velvet rested on the pure curve of the cheeks. The closed lids, the mouth still faintly stained with color, the delicate nose, the full, childish lips, sensitive, sweet, resting softly upon each other. If these were not all parts of but one lovely miracle, then there is no beauty save in a dream of paradise. A gold band of linked scarabs bound her short, thick hair straight across the forehead. Thin scales of gold fell from a necklace, clothing her breasts in brilliant discolored metal, through which ivory-tinted skin showed. A belt of pure, soft gold clasped her body at the waist. Gold-edged sandals clung to her little feet. At first, when the stunned surprise had subsided, I thought that I was looking upon some miracle of ancient embalming, hitherto unknown. Yet, in the smooth skin there was no slit to prove it, no opening in any vein or artery, no mutilation of this sculptured masterpiece of the Most High, no cerements, no bandages, no gilded carven case with painted face to stare open-eyed through the wailing cycles. This was the image of sleep, of life unconscious, not of death. Yet his was death, death that had come upon her centuries and centuries ago. For the gold had turned iridescent and magnificently discolored. The sandal straps fell into dust as I bent above them, leaving the sandals clinging to her feet only by the wide silver core of the thongs. And, as I touched it fearfully, the veil-like garment covering her vanished into thin air, its metal stars twinkling in a shower around her on the stone floor. The tracer, motionless, intent, scarcely breathed. The younger man moved restlessly in his chair, the dazed light in his eyes clearing to sullen consciousness. "What more is there to tell?" he said. "And to what purpose? All this is time wasted. I have my work cut out for me. What more is there to tell?" "What you have left untold," said the tracer, with the slightest ring of authority in his quiet voice. And, as though he had added, "Obey," the younger man sank back in his chair, his hands contracting nervously. "I went back to El Teb," he said. "I walked like a dreaming man. My sleep was haunted by her beauty. Night after night, when at last I fell asleep, instantly I saw her face, and her dark eyes opening into mine in childish bewilderment. Day after day I rode out to the fallen pillar and descended to that dark chamber where she lay alone. Then there came a time when I could not endure the thought of her lying there alone. I had never dared to touch her. Horror of what might happen had held me aloof lest she crumble at my touch to that awful powder which I had trodden on. I did not know what to do. My Arabs had begun to whisper among themselves, suspicious of my absences, impatient to break camp, perhaps, and roam on once more. Perhaps they believed I had discovered treasure somewhere. I am not sure. At any rate, dread of their following me, determination to take my dead away with me, drove me into action. And that day when I reached her silent chamber, I lighted my candle, and, leaning above her for one last look, I touched her shoulder with my fingertip. It was a strange sensation. Prepared for a dreadful dissolution, utterly unprepared for cool, yielding flesh, I almost dropped where I stood. For her body was neither cold nor warm, neither dust-dry nor moist, neither the skin of the living nor the dead. It was firm, almost stiff, yet not absolutely without a certain hint of flexibility. The appalling wonder of it consumed me. Fear, incredulity, terror, apathy succeeded each other. Then slowly a fierce shrinking happiness swept me in every fiber. This marvelous death, this triumph of beauty over death, was mine. Never again should she lie here alone through the solitudes of night and day. Never again should the dignity of death lack the tribute demanded of life. Here was the appointed watcher, I, who had found her alone in the wastes of the world, all alone on the outermost edges of the world, a child, dead and unguarded. And standing there beside her, I knew that I should never love again. He straightened up, stretching out his arm. I did not intend to carry her away to what is known as Christian burial. How could I consign her to darkness again, with all its dreadful mockery of marble, all its awful emblems? This lovely stranger was to be my guest forever. The living should be near her while she slept so sweetly her slumber through the centuries. She should have warmth and soft hangings and sunlight and flowers, and her unconscious ears should be filled with the pleasant stir of living things. I have a house in the country, a very old house among meadows and young woodlands. And I had dreamed of giving this child a home. His voice broke. He buried his head in his hands a moment. But when he lifted it again, his features were hard as steel. There was already talk in the bazaar about me. I was probably followed, but I did not know it. Then one of my men disappeared. For a week I hesitated to trust my Arabs, but there was no other way. I told them there was a mummy which I desired to carry to some port and smuggle out of the country without consulting the government. I knew perfectly well that the government would never forego its claim to such a relic of Egyptian antiquity. I offered my men too much, perhaps. I don't know. They hesitated for a week, trying by every artifice to see the treasure, but I never let them out of my sight. Then one day 2 white men came into camp, and with them came a government escort to arrest me for looting an Egyptian tomb. The white men were Joram Smiles and that Eurasian, Emmanuel Gandon, who was partly white, I suppose. I didn't comprehend what they were up to at first. They escorted me 40 miles to confront the official at Schönbach. When, after a stormy week, I was permitted to return to Sais, my Arabs and the white men were gone, and the stone chamber under the water garden wall was empty as the hand I hold out to you. He opened his palm and rose, his narrowing eyes clear and dangerous. At the bazaar I learned enough to know what had been done. I traced the white men to the coast. They sailed on the Scythian Queen, taking with them all that I care for on earth or in heaven. And you ask me why I measure their distance from me by a bullet's flight. The tracer also rose, pale and grave. Wait, he said. There are other things to be done before you prepare to face a jury for double murder. It is for them to choose, said Burke. They shall have the choice of returning to me my dead, or of going to hell full of lead. Exactly, my dear sir. That part is not difficult, said the tracer quietly. There will be no occasion for violence, I assure you. Kindly leave such details to me. I know what is to be done. You are outwardly very calm, Mr. Burke, even dangerously placid. But though you maintain an admirable command over yourself superficially, you are laboring under terrible excitement. Therefore it is my duty to say to you at once that there is no cause for your excitement, no cause for your apprehension as to results. I feel exceedingly confident that you will, in due time, regain possession of all that you care for most. Quietly, my dear sir. You are not yet ready to meet these men, nor am I ready to go with you. I beg you to continue your habit of self-command for a little while. There is no haste, that is to say, there is every reason to make haste slowly. And the quickest method is to seat yourself. Thank you, and I shall sit here beside you and spread out this papyrus scroll for your inspection. Burke stared at the tracer, then at the scroll. What has that inscription to do with the matter in hand? He demanded impatiently. I leave you to judge, said the tracer. A dull tint of excitement flushed his lean cheeks. He twisted his gray mustache and bent over the unrolled scroll, which was now held flat by weights at the 4 corners. Can you understand any of these symbols, Mr. Burke? He asked. Curious, mused the tracer. Do you know it was fortunate that you put this bit of papyrus in the pocket of your shooting coat? So fortunate that, in a way, it approaches the miraculous. What do you mean? Is there anything in that scroll bearing on this matter? Yes, and you can read it? Are you versed in such learning, Mr. Keene? I am an Egyptologist, among other details, said the tracer calmly. The young man gazed at him, astonished. The tracer of lost persons picked up a pencil, laid a sheet of paper on the table beside the papyrus, and slowly began to copy the first symbol. Chapter 19. The ancient Egyptian word for the personal pronoun, I, was Anak, said the tracer placidly. The phonetic for was the hieroglyph. A reed, for and the water symbol. For you the symbols. 4K. Therefore this hieroglyphic inscription begins with the personal pronoun. Or I. That is very easy, of course. Now, the most ancient of Egyptian inscriptions read vertically in columns. There are only 2 columns in this papyrus, so we'll try it vertically and pass downward to the next symbol, which is enclosed in a sort of frame or cartouche. That immediately signifies that royalty is mentioned. Therefore, we have already translated as much as I, the king, or queen. Do you see? Yes, said Burke, staring. Very well. Now this symbol, number 2, spells out the word Marys. In this way, M, pronounced me, is phonetically symbolized by the characters Abai, a mouth, and the comma, and the hieroglyph, A by 2 reads, and 2 oblique strokes, and S by. This gives us Marys, the name of that deposed and fugitive king of Egypt who, after a last raid on the summer palace of Mercian, usurping ruler of Egypt, was followed and tracked to Sais, where, with an arrow through his back, he crawled to El Teb and finally died there of his wound. All this Egyptologists are perfectly familiar with in the translations of the boastful tablets and inscriptions erected near Sais by Mercian, the 312th sovereign after Queen Nitocris. He looked up at Burke, smiling. Therefore, he said, this papyrus scroll was written by Marys, ex-king, a speculative thousands of years before Christ. And it begins, I, Marys the king. How does all this bear upon what concerns me? Demanded Burke. Wait! Something in the quiet significance of the tracer's brief command sent a curious thrill through the younger man. He leaned stiffly forward, studying the scroll, every faculty concentrated on the symbol which the tracer had now touched with the carefully sharpened point of his pencil. That, said Mr. Keene, is the ancient Egyptian word for little, Ket. The next, below, written in 2 lines, is Samoris, a proper name, the name of a woman. Under that, again, is the symbol for the number 18, the decimal sign, and 8 vertical strokes. Under that, again, is a hieroglyph of another sort, an ideograph representing a girl with a harp, and, beneath that, the symbol which always represented a dancing girl, and also the royal symbol enclosed in a cartouche, which means literally the ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt. Under that is the significant symbol, representing an arm and a hand holding a stick. This always means force, to take forcibly or to use violence. Therefore, so far, we have the following literal translation. I, Marys the king, little Samoris, 18, a harpist, dancing girl, the ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, to take by violence. What does that make? Broke in Burke impatiently. Wait until we have translated everything literally. And, Mr. Burke, it might make it easier for us both if you would remember that I have had the pleasure of deciphering many hundreds of papyri before you had ever heard that there were such things. I beg your pardon, said the young man in a low voice. I beg yours for my impatience, said the tracer pleasantly. This deciphering always did affect my nerves and shorten my temper. And, no doubt, it is quite as hard on you. Shall we go on, Mr. Burke? If you please, Mr. Keene. So the tracer laid his pencil point on the next symbol. That is the symbol for night, he said, and that is the water symbol again, as you know, and that is the ideograph, meaning a ship. The 5 reverse crescents record the number of days' voyage. The sign means a house, and is also the letter H in the Egyptian alphabet. Under it, again, we have a repetition of the first symbol meaning I, and a repetition of the second symbol, meaning Marys, the king. Then, below that cartouche, comes a new symbol, which is the feminine personal pronoun, centis, meaning she. And the first column is completed with the symbol for the ancient Egyptian verb, nes, to awake. And now we take the second column, which begins with the jackal ideograph expressing slyness or cleverness. Under it is the hieroglyph meaning to run away, to escape. And under that, Mr. Burke, is one of the rarest of all Egyptian symbols, a symbol seldom seen on stone or papyrus, except in rare references to the mysteries of Isis. The meaning of it, so long in dispute, has finally been practically determined through a new discovery in the cuneiform inscriptions. It is the symbol of 2 hands holding 2 closed eyes, and it signifies power. You mean that those ancients understood hypnotism? Asked Burke, astonished. Evidently their priests did. Evidently hypnotism was understood and employed in certain mysteries. and there is the symbol of it, and under it the hieroglyphs, meaning a day and a night, with the symbol, as usual, present to signify force or strength employed. Under that, again, is a human figure stretched upon a typical Egyptian couch. And now, Mr. Burke, note carefully 3 modifying signs. First, that it is a couch or bed on which the figure is stretched, not the funeral couch, not the embalming slab. Second, there is no mummy mask covering the face, and no mummy case covering the body. Third, that under the recumbent figure is pictured an open mouth, not a closed one. All these modify the ideograph, apparently representing death. But the sleep symbol is not present. Therefore, it is a sound inference that all this simply confirms the symbol of hypnotism. Burke, intensely absorbed, stared steadily at the scroll. Now, continued Mr. Keene, we note the symbol of force again, always present, and, continuing horizontally, a cartouche quite empty except for the midday sun. That is simply translated. The midday sun illuminates nothing. Meres, deposed, is king only in name, and the sun no longer shines on him as ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt. Under that despairing symbol, king of nothing, we have the phonetics which spell Shah, the word for garden. And, just beyond this, horizontally, the modifying ideograph meaning a water garden. A design of lotus and tree alternating on a terrace. Under that is the symbol for the word Eneb, a wall. Beyond that, horizontally, is the symbol for house. It should be placed under the wall symbol. But the Egyptians were very apt to fill up spaces instead of continuing their vertical columns. Now, beneath, we find the imperative command, arise, and the Egyptian personal pronoun intuitin, which means you or thou. Under that is the symbol, which means priest, or, literally, priest man. Then comes the imperative awake to life. After that, our first symbol again, meaning I, followed horizontally by the symbol, signifying to go. Then comes a very important drawing. You see, the picture of a man with a jackal's head, not a dog's head. It is not accompanied by the phonetic in a cartouche, as it should be. Probably the writer was in desperate haste at the end. But, nevertheless, it is easy to translate that symbol of the man with a jackal's head. It is a picture of the Egyptian god, Anubis, who was supposed to linger at the side of the dying to conduct their souls. Anubis, the jackal-headed, is the courier, the personal escort of departing souls. And this is he. And now the screed ends with the cry, pray for me. The last symbol on this strange scroll, this missive written by a deposed, wounded, and dying king to an unnamed priest. Here is the literal translation in columns. I cunning, Meres the king escape, little hypnotize, Somaris king of nothing. 18 place forcibly, a harpist garden, a dancing girl, ruler of water garden, upper and lower wall, Egypt house, took forcibly, night arise, do, by water thou, 5 days priest man, ship awake, house to life, I go, Meres the king Anubis, she pray, awake, and this is what that letter, thousands of years old, means in this language of ours, hundreds of years young. I, Meres the king, sees little Somaris, a harpist and a dancing girl, 18 years of age, belonging to the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, and carried her away at night on shipboard, a voyage of 5 days, to my house. I, Meres the king, lest she lie awake watching cunningly for a chance to escape, hypnotized her, or had her hypnotized, so that she lay like one dead or asleep, but breathing. And I, king no longer of Upper and Lower Egypt, took her and placed her in my house under the wall of the water garden. Arise, therefore, O thou priest, go, and awaken her to life. I am dying, I go with Anubis. Pray for me. Chapter 20. For a full minute the two men sat there without moving or speaking. Then the tracer laid aside his pencil. To sum up, he said, opening the palm of his left hand and placing the forefinger of his right across it. The excavation made by the falling pillar raised in triumph above the water garden of the deposed king, Meres, by his rival, was the subterranean house of Meres. The prostrate figure which crumbled to powder at your touch may have been the very priest to whom this letter or papyrus was written. Perhaps the bearer of the scroll was a traitor and stabbed the priest as he was reading the missive. Who can tell how that priest died? He either died or betrayed his trust, for he never aroused the little Samoris from her suspended animation. And the water garden fell into ruins and she slept. And the ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt raised his columns, lotus-crowned, above the ruins, and she slept on. Then, you came. Burke stared like one stupefied. I do not know, said the tracer gravely. What balm there may be in a suspension of sensation, perhaps of vitality, to protect the human body from corruption after death. I do not know how soon suspended animation or the state of hypnotic coma, undisturbed, changes into death, whether it comes gradually, imperceptibly freeing the soul, whether the soul hides there, asleep, until suddenly the flame of vitality is extinguished. I do not know how long she lay there with life in her. He leaned back and touched an electric bell, then, turning to Burke. Speaking of pistol range, he said, unstrap those weapons and pass them over, if you please. And the young man obeyed as in a trance. Thank you. There are 4 men coming into this room. You will keep your seat, if you please, Mr. Burke. After a moment the door opened noiselessly. 2 men handcuffed together entered the room. 2 men, hands in their pockets, sauntered carelessly behind the prisoners and leaned back against the closed door. That short, red-haired, lame man with the cast in his eye. Do you recognize him? Asked the tracer quietly. Burke, grasping the arms of his chair, had started to rise, fury fairly blazing from his eyes. But, at the sound of the tracer's calm, even voice, he sank back into his chair. That is Joram Smiles? You recognize him, continued Mr. Keene. Burke nodded. Exactly. Alias Limpy, alias Red Joe, alias Big Stick Joram, alias Pinky. Swindler. International confidence man. Fence. Burglar. Gambler. Convicted in 1887 and sent to Sing Sing for forgery. Convicted in 1898 and sent to Auburn for swindling. Arrested by my men on board the SS Scythian Queen at the cabled request of John T. Burke, Esquire, and held to explain the nature of his luggage, which consisted of the contents of an Egyptian vault or underground ruin, declared at the custom house as a mummy, and passed as such. The quiet, monotonous voice of the tracer halted. Then, as he glanced at the second prisoner, grew harder. Emmanuel Gandon, General International Criminal, with over 100 aliases, arrested in company with Smiles and held until Mr. Burke's arrival. Turning to Burke, the tracer continued. Fortunately, the Scythian Queen broke down off Brindisi. It gave us time to act on your cable. We found these men aboard when she was signaled off the hook. I went out with the pilot myself, Mr. Burke. Smiles shot a wicked look at Burke. Gandon scowled at the floor. Now, said the tracer pleasantly, meeting the venomous glare of Smiles, I'll get you that warrant you have been demanding to have exhibited to you. Here it is, charging you and your amiable friend Gandon with breaking into and robbing the Metropolitan Museum of Ancient Egyptian Gold Ornaments in March 1903 and taking them to France, where they were sold to collectors. It seems that you found the business good enough to go prowling about Egypt on a hunt for something to sell here. A great mistake, my friends, a very great mistake, because, after the museum has finished with you, the Egyptian government desires to extradite you. And I rather suspect you'll have to go. He nodded to the 2 quiet men leaning against the door. Come, Joram, said one of them pleasantly. But Smiles turned furiously on the tracer. You lie, you old gray rat, he cried. That ain't no mummy. That's a plain dead girl. And there ain't no extradition for body snatching. So I guess them niggers at Cairo won't get us. After all. Perhaps, said the tracer, looking at Burke, who had risen, pale and astounded. Sit down, Mr. Burke. There is no need to question these men. No need to demand what they robbed you of. For, he added slowly, what they took from the garden grotto of Sais, and from you, I have under my own protection. The tracer rose, locked the door through which the prisoners and their escorts had departed. Then, turning gravely on Burke, he continued. That panel, there, is a door. There is a room beyond. A room facing to the south, bright with sunshine, flowers, soft rugs, and draperies of the east. She is there, like a child asleep. Burke reeled, steadying himself against the wall. The tracer stared at space, speaking very slowly. Such death I have never before heard of. From the moment she came under my protection I have dared to doubt many things. And an hour ago you brought me a papyrus scroll confirming my doubts. I doubt still. Heaven knows what. Who can say how long the flame of life may flicker within suspended animation? A week? A month? A year? Longer than that? Yes, the Hindus have proved it. How long? The span of a normal life? Or longer? Can the life flame burn indefinitely when the functions are absolutely suspended, generation after generation, century after century? Burke, ghastly white, straightened up, quivering in every limb. The tracer, as pale as he, laid his hand on the secret panel. If you dare say it, the phrase is this: O ket somoris, Ness. O little somoris, awake. I dare. In heaven's name, open that door. Then, averting his head, the tracer of lost persons swung open the panel. A flood of sunshine flashed on Burke's face. He entered, and the panel door closed behind him without a sound. Minute after minute passed. The tracer stood as though turned to stone, gray head bent. Then he heard Burke's voice ring out unsteadily. O ket somoris, somoris. O ket somoris, Ness. And again, somoris, somoris. O beloved, awake. And once more, Ness. O somoris. Silence, broken by a strange, sweet, drowsy plaint, like a child awakened at midnight by a dazzling light. Somoris. Then, through the stillness, a little laugh, and a softly tremulous voice. Ari una with Macron ha with Macron, Owen Tuck Sen. Chapter 21. What we want to do, said Gatewood over the telephone, is to give you a corking little dinner at the Santa Regina. There'll be Mr. and Mrs. Tommy Kearns, Captain and Mrs. Heron, Mr. and Mrs. Jack Burke, Mrs. Gatewood, and myself. We want you to set the date for it, Mr. Keene. And we also wish you to suggest one more deliriously happy couple whom you have dragged out of misery and flung headfirst into terrestrial paradise. Do you young people really care to do this for me? Asked the tracer, laughing. Of course we do. We're crazy about it. We want one more couple, and you to set the date. There was the slightest pause. Then the tracer's voice, with the same undertone of amusement ringing through it. How would your cousin, Victor Carden, do? Is all right. Only he isn't married. We want two people whom you have joined together after Hazard has put them asunder and done stunts with them. Very well. Victor Carden and his very lovely wife will be just the people. Is Victor married? Demanded Gatewood, astonished. No, said the tracer demurely. But he will be in time for that dinner. And he set the date for the end of the week in an amused voice, and rang off. Then he glanced at the clock, touched an electric bell, and again unhooking the receiver of the telephone, called up the Sherwood Studios and asked for Mr. Carden. Is this Mr. Carden? Oh, good morning, Mr. Carden. This is Mr. Keene, tracer of lost persons. Could you make it convenient to call? Say in course of half an hour? Thank you. What? Who? Well, speaking with that caution and reserve which we are obliged to employ in making any preliminary statements to our clients, I think I may safely say that you have every reason to feel moderately encouraged. You mean, said Carden's voice, that you have actually solved the proposition? It has been a difficult proposition, Mr. Carden. I will not deny that it has taxed our resources to the uttermost. Over 1,000 people, first and last, have been employed on this case. It has been a slow and tedious affair, Mr. Carden, tedious for us all. We seldom have a case continue as long as this has. It is a year ago today since you placed the matter in our hands. What? Well, without committing myself, I think that I may venture to express a carefully qualified opinion that the solution of the case is probably practically in the way of being almost accomplished. Yes, I shall expect you in half an hour. Goodbye. The tracer of lost persons' eyes were twinkling as he hung up the receiver and turned in his revolving chair to meet the pretty young woman who had entered in response to his ring. The Carden case, if you please, Miss Smith, he said, smiling to himself. The young woman also smiled. The Carden case had become a classic in the office. Nobody except Mr. Keene had believed that the case could ever be solved. Safe deposit box 108,923, said Miss Smith softly, pressing a speaking tube to her red lips. In a few moments there came a hissing thud from the pneumatic tube. Miss Smith unlocked it and extracted a smooth, steel cylinder. The combination for that cylinder is A4-44-11X, observed the tracer, consulting a cipher code, which, translated, he added, gives us the setting combination 1, DRJ-24. Miss Smith turned the movable discs at the end of the cylinder until the required combination appeared. Then she unscrewed the cylinder head and dumped out the documents in the famous Carden case. As Mr. Carden will be here in half an hour or so, I think we had better run over the case briefly, nodded the tracer, leaning back in his chair and composing himself to listen. Begin with my preliminary memorandum, Miss Smith. Case 108923, began the girl. Then she read the date, Carden's full name, Victor Carden, a terse biography of the same gentleman, and added, case accepted. Contingent fee, $5,000. Quite so, said Mr. Keene. Now, run through the minutes of the first interview. And Miss Smith unrolled a typewritten scroll and read. Victor Carden, Esquire, the well-known artist, called this evening at 6.30. Tall, well-bred, good appearance, very handsome, very much embarrassed. Questioned by Mr. Keene, he turned pink and looked timidly at the stenographer, Miss Colt. Asked if he might not see Mr. Keene alone, Miss Colt retired. Mr. Keene set the recording phonograph in motion by dropping his elbow on his desk. A brief resume of the cylinder records followed. Mr. Carden asked Mr. Keene if he, Mr. Keene, knew who he, Mr. Carden, was. Mr. Keene replied that everybody knew Mr. Carden, the celebrated painter and illustrator who had created the popular type of beauty known as the Carden girl. Mr. Carden blushed and fidgeted. Notes from Mr. Keene's observation book, pp. 291 to 297. Admitted that he was the creator of the Carden girl. Admitted he had drawn and painted that particular type of feminine beauty many times. Fidgeted some more. Keene's OB, pp. 298 to 299. Volunteered the statement that this type of beauty, known as the Carden girl, was the cause of great unhappiness to himself. Questioned, turned pinker and fidgeted. KOB, page 300. Denied that his present trouble was caused by the model who had posed for the Carden girl. Explained that a number of assorted models had posed for that type of beauty. Further explained that none of them resembled the type, that the type was his own creation, that he used models merely for the anatomy, and that he always idealized form and features. Questioned again, admitted that the features of the Carden girl were his ideal of the highest and loveliest type of feminine beauty. Did not deny that he had fallen in love with his own creation. Turned red and tried to smoke. KOB, page 303. Admitted he had been fascinated himself with his own rendering of a type of beauty which he had never seen anywhere except as rendered by his own pencil on paper or on canvas. Fidgeted. KOB, page 304. Admitted that he could easily fall in love with a woman who resembled the Carden girl. Didn't believe she ever really existed. Confessed he had hoped for years to encounter her, but had begun to despair. Admitted that he had ventured to think that Mr. Keene might trace such a girl for him. Doubted Mr. Keene's success. Fidgeted. KOB, page 306, and asked Mr. Keene to take the case. Promised to send to Mr. Keene a painting in oil which embodied his loftiest ideal of the type known as the Carden girl. Portrait received. Lithographs made and distributed to our agents according to routine, from Canada to Mexico and from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Mr. Keene terminated the interview with characteristic tact, accepting the case on the contingent fee of $5,000. Very well, said the tracer, as Miss Smith rolled up the scroll and looked at him for further instructions. Now, perhaps you had better run over the short summary of proceedings to date. I mean the digest which you will find attached to the completed records. Miss Smith found the paper, unrolled it, and read. During the 12 months investigation and search in Re Carden, 709 young women were discovered who resembled very closely the type sought for. By process of elimination, owing to defects in figure, features, speech, breeding, etc., etc., this list was cut down to 3. One of these occasionally chewed gum, but otherwise resembled the type. The second married before the investigation of her habits could be completed. The third is apparently a flawless replica of Mr. Carden's original in face, figure, breeding, education, moral and mental habits. See Document 23A. Read Document 23A, nodded Mr. Keene. And Miss Smith read. Rosalind Hollis, M.D. Age 24. Height 5 feet 9 inches. Weight 160 pounds. Thick, bright, ruddy. Hair. Golden and inclined to curl. Teeth. Perfect. Eyes. Dark violet blue. Mouth. Perfect. Color. Fair. An ivory tinted. Blonde. Figure. Perfect. Health. Perfect. Temper. Feminine. Austere. With a. Habits. Resolutely suppressed. Capacity for romance. Business. None. Profession. Physician. Mania. Omission. Note. Dr. Rosalind Hollis was presented to society in her 18th year. At the end of her second season, she withdrew from society with the determination to devote her entire life to charity. Settlement work and the study of medicine have occupied her constantly. Recently admitted to practice, she spends her mornings in visiting the poor, whom she treats free of all charge. Her afternoons and evenings are devoted to what she expects is to be her specialty, the study of the rare malady known as Lamour's disease. See note on second page. It is understood that Dr. Hollis has abjured the society of all men other than her patients and such of her professional confreres as she is obliged to consult or work with. Her theory is that of the beehive, drones for mates, workers for work. She adds, very decidedly, that she belongs to the latter division, and means to remain there permanently. Note, Mr. Keen's OB, pp 916-18. Her eccentricity is probably the result of a fine, wholesome, highly strung young girl taking life and herself too seriously. The remedy will be the right man. Exactly, nodded Mr. Keen, joining the tips of his thin fingers and partly closing his eyes. Now, Miss Smith, the disease which Dr. Hollis intends to make her specialty. Have you any notes on that? Here they are, said Miss Smith, and she read, Lamour's disease, the rarest of all known diseases, first discovered and described by Earl S. Lamour, M.D., M.S., F.B.A., M.F.H., in 1861. Only a single case has ever been observed. This case is fully described in Dr. Lamour's superb and monumental work in 16 volumes. Briefly, the disease appears without any known cause, and is ultimately supposed to result fatally. The first symptom is the appearance of a faintly bluish circle under the eyes, as though the patient was accustomed to using the eyes too steadily at times. Sometimes a slight degree of fever accompanies this manifestation. Pulse and temperature vary. The patient is apparently in excellent health, but liable to loss of appetite, restlessness, and a sudden flushing of the face. These symptoms are followed by others unmistakable. The patient becomes silent at times evinces a weakness for sentimental expressions, flushes easily, is easily depressed, will sit for hours looking at one person, and, if not checked, will exhibit impulsive symptoms of affection for the opposite sex. The strangest symptom of all, however, is the physical change in the patient, whose features and figure, under the trained eye of the observer, gradually from day to day assume the symmetry and charm of a beauty almost unearthly, sometimes accompanied by a spiritual pallor which is unmistakable in confirming the diagnosis, and which, Dr. Lamour believes, presages the inexorable approach of immortality. There is no known remedy for Lamour's disease. The only case on record is the case of the young lady described by Dr. Lamour, who watched her for years with unexampled patience and enthusiasm, finally, in the interest of science, marrying his patient in order to devote his life to a study of her symptoms. Unfortunately, some of these disappeared early, within a week, but the curious manifestation of physical beauty remained and continued to increase daily to a dazzling radiance, with no apparent injury to the patient. Dr. Lamour, unfortunately, died before his investigations, covering over 40 years, could be completed. His widow survived him for a day or two only, leaving 16 children. Here is a wide and unknown field for medical men to investigate. It is safe to say that the physician who first discovers the bacillus of Lamour's disease and the proper remedy to combat it will reap as his reward a glory and renown imperishable. Lamour's disease is a disease not yet understood, a disease whose termination is believed to be fatal, a strange disease which seems to render radiant and beautiful the features of the patient, brightening them with the forewarning of impending death and the splendid resurrection of immortality. The tracer of lost persons caressed his chin reflectively. Exactly, Miss Smith. So this is a disease which Dr. Hollis has chosen for her specialty. And only one case on record. Exactly. Thank you. Miss Smith replaced the papers in the steel cylinder, slipped it into the pneumatic tube, sent it whizzing below to the safe deposit vaults, and, saluting Mr. Keene with a pleasant inclination of her head, went out of the room. The tracer turned in his chair, picked up the daily detective report, and scanned it until he came to the name Hollis. It appeared that the daily routine of Rosalind Hollis had not varied during the past 3 weeks. In the morning, she was good to the poor with bottles and pills. In the afternoon, she tucked one of Lamore's famous 16 volumes under her arm and walked to Central Park, where, with democratic simplicity, she sat on a secluded bench and pored over the symptoms of Lamore's disease. About 5, she retired to her severely simple apartments in the big brownstone office building devoted to physicians, corner of 58th Street and Madison Avenue. Here she took tea, read a little, dined all alone, and retired about 9. This was the guileless but determined existence of Rosalind Hollis, M.D., according to McConnell, the detective assigned to observe her. The tracer refolded the report of his chief of detectives and pigeonholed it just as the door opened and a tall, well-built, attractive young man entered. Shyness was written all over him. He offered his hand to Mr. Keene with an embarrassed air and seated himself at that gentleman's invitation. "I'm almost sorry I ever began this sort of thing," he blurted out, like a big schoolboy appalled at his own misdemeanors. "The truth is, Mr. Keene, that the prospect of actually seeing a Cardin girl alive has scared me through and through. I've a notion that my business with that sort of a girl ends when I've drawn her picture." "But surely," said the tracer mildly, "you have some natural curiosity to see the living copy of your charming but inanimate originals, haven't you, Mr. Cardin?" "Yes. Oh, certainly. I'd like to see one of them alive, say out of a window, or from a cab. I should not care to be too close to her." "But merely seeing her does not commit you," interposed Mr. Keene, smiling. "She is far too busy, too much absorbed in her own affairs to take any notice of you. I understand that she has something of an aversion for men." "Aversion? Well, she excludes them as unnecessary to her existence." "Why?" asked Cardin. "Because she has a mission in life," said Mr. Keene gravely. Cardin looked out of the window. It was pleasant weather, June in all its early loveliness, the 5th day of June. The 6th was his birthday. "I've simply got to marry somebody before the day after tomorrow," he said aloud. "That is, if I want my legacy." "What?" demanded the tracer sharply. Cardin turned, pink and guilty. "I didn't tell you all the circumstances of my case," he said. "I suppose I ought to have done so." "Exactly," said the tracer severely. "Why is it necessary that you marry somebody before the day after tomorrow?" "Well, it's my 25th birthday. Somebody has left you money on condition that you marry before your 25th birthday? Is that it, Mr. Cardin? An uncle? An imbecile grandfather? A sentimental aunt? My Aunt Tabby Van Beekman. Where is she?" "In Trinity Churchyard. It's too late to expostulate with her, you see. Besides, it wouldn't have done any good when she was alive." The tracer knitted his brows, musing, the points of his slim fingers joined. "She was very proud, very autocratic," said Cardin. "I am the last of my race, and my aunt was determined that the race should not die out with me. I don't want to marry an increase, but she's trying to make me. At all events, I am not going to marry any woman inferior to the type I have created with my pencil, what the public calls the Cardin girl. And now you see that your discovery of this living type comes rather late. In 2 days I must be legally married if I want my Aunt Tabby's legacy. And today for the first time I hear of a girl who, you assure me, compares favorably to my copyrighted type, but who has a mission and an aversion to men. So you see, Mr. Keene, that the matter is perfectly hopeless." "I don't see anything of the kind," said Mr. Keene firmly. "What? Do you believe there is any chance of your falling in love within the next hour or so?" "Yes, I do. I think there is every chance of it. I am sure of it. But that is not the difficulty. The problem is far more complicated." "You mean?" "Exactly. How to marry that girl before day after tomorrow. That's the problem, Mr. Cardin. Not whether you are capable of falling in love with her. I have seen her. I know you can't avoid falling in love with her. Nobody could. I myself am on the verge of it. And I am 50. You can't avoid loving her." "If that were so," said Cardin gravely, If I were really going to fall in love with her, I would not care a rap about my Aunt Tabby and her money. You ought to care about it for this young girl's sake. That legacy is virtually hers, not yours. She has a right to it. No man can ever give enough to the woman he loves. No man has ever done so. What she gives and what he gives are never a fair exchange. If you can balance the account in any measure, it is your duty to do it. Mr. Carden, if she comes to love you, she may think it very fine that you bring to her your love, yourself, your fame, your talents, your success, your position, your gratifying income. But I tell you, it's not enough to balance the account. It is never enough. No, not all your devotion to her included. You can never balance the account on earth. All you can do is to try to balance it materially and spiritually. Therefore, I say, endow her with all your earthly goods. Give all you can in every way to lighten as much as possible man's hopeless debt to all women who have ever loved. You talk about it as though I were already committed, said Carden, astonished. You are, morally. For a month I have, without her knowledge, it is true, invaded the privacy of a very lovely young girl, studied her minutely, possessed myself of her history, informed myself of her habits. What excuse had I for this unless I desired her happiness and yours? Nobody could offer me any inducement to engage in such a practice unless I believed that the means might justify a moral conclusion. And the moral conclusion of this investigation is your marriage to her. Certainly, said Carden uneasily. But how are we going to accomplish it by tomorrow? How is it going to be accomplished at all? The tracer of lost persons rose and began to pace the long rug, clasping his hands behind his back. Minute after minute sped. Carden stared alternately at Mr. Keene and at the blue sky through the open window. It is seldom, said Mr. Keene with evident annoyance, that I personally take any spectacular part in the actual and concrete demonstrations necessary to a successful conclusion of a client's case. But I've got to do it this time. He went to a cupboard, picked out a gray wig and gray side whiskers and deliberately waved them at Carden. You see what these look like? He demanded. Why, yes. Very well. It is now noon. Do you know the park? Do you happen to recollect a shady turn in the path after you cross the bridge over the Swan Lake? Here, I'll draw it for you. Now, here is the lake. Here's the esplanade and fountain, you see. Here's the path. You follow it. So, around the lake, across the bridge, then following the lake to the right. So, then up the wooded slope to the left. So, now, here's a bench. I mark it number 1. She sits there with her book. There she is. If she looks like that, began Carden, and they both laughed with the slightest trace of excitement. Here is bench number 2, resumed the tracer. Here you sit, and there you are. Thanks, said Carden, laughing again. Now, continued the tracer, you must be there at 1 o'clock. She will be there at 1:30, or earlier perhaps. A little later I will become benignly visible. Your part is merely a thinking part. You are to do nothing, say nothing, unless spoken to. And when you are spoken to, you are to acquiesce in whatever anybody says to you, and you are to do whatever anybody requests you to do. And, above all, don't be surprised at anything that may happen. You'll be nervous enough? I expect that. You'll probably color up and flush and fidget. I expect that. I count on that. But don't lose your nerve entirely, and don't think of attempting to escape. Escape? From what? From whom? From her? Huh? Are you going to follow my instructions? Demanded the tracer of lost persons. Why yes, of course. Very well. Then, I'm going to rub some of this under your eyes. And Mr. Keene produced a makeup box and, walking over to Carden, calmly darkened the skin under his eyes. I look as though I had been on a bat, exclaimed Carden, surveying himself in a mirror. Do you think any girl could find any attraction in such a countenance? She will, observed the tracer meaningly. Now, Mr. Carden, one last word. The moment you find yourself in love with her, and the first moment you have the chance to do so decently, make love to her. She won't dismiss you. She will repulse you, of course, but she won't let you go. I know what I am saying. All I ask of you is to promise on your honor to carry out these instructions. Do you promise? I do. Then here is the map of the rendezvous which I have drawn. Be there promptly. Good morning. Chapter 22. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, a young man earnestly consulting a map might have been seen pursuing his solitary way through Central Park. Fresh green foliage arched above him, flecking the path with fretted shadow and sunlight. The sweet odor of flowering shrubs saturated the air. The waters of the lake sparkled where swans swept to and fro, snowy wings spread like sails to the fitful June wind. "This," he murmured, pausing at a shaded bend in the path, "must be bench number 1. I am not to sit on that. This must be bench number 2. I am to sit on that. So here I am," he added nervously, seating himself and looking about him with the caution of a cat in a strange backyard. There was nobody in sight. Reassured, he ventured to drop one knee over the other and lean upon his walking stick. For a few minutes he remained in this non-committal attitude, alert at every sound, anxious, uncomfortable, dreading he knew not what. A big, fat, gray squirrel racing noisily across the fallen leaves gave him a shock. A number of birds came to look at him, or so it appeared to him, for in the inquisitive scrutiny of a robin he fancied he divined sardonic meaning, and in the blank yellow stare of a purple grackle, a sinister significance out of all proportion to the size of the bird. What an absurd position to be in, he thought. And suddenly he was seized with a desire to flee. He didn't because he had promised not to, but the desire persisted to the point of mania. Oh, how he could run if he only hadn't promised not to. His entire being tingled with the latent possibilities of a burst of terrific speed. He wanted to scuttle away like a scared rabbit. The pace of the kangaroo would be slow in comparison. What a record he could make if he hadn't promised not to. He crossed his knees the other way and brooded. The gray squirrel climbed the bench and nosed his pockets for possible peanuts, then hopped off hopefully toward a distant nursemaid and 2 children. Growing more alarmed every time he consulted his watch card and attempted to stem his rising panic with logic and philosophy, repeating, "Steady. My son, don't act like this. You're not obliged to marry her if you don't fall in love with her. And if you do, you won't mind marrying her. That is philosophy. That is logic. Oh, I wonder what will have happened to me by this time tomorrow. I wish it were this time tomorrow. I wish it were this time next month. Then it would be all over. Then it would be." His muttering speech froze on his lips. Rooted to his bench, he sat staring at a distant figure approaching, the figure of a young girl in a summer gown. Nearer, nearer she came, walking with a free-limbed, graceful step, head high, one arm clasping a book. That was the way the girls he drew would have walked had they ever lived. Even in the midst of his fright, his artist's eyes noted the perfect figure, too, and the witchery of its grace and contour, and the fascinating poise of her head, and the splendid color of her hair, noted mechanically the flowing lines of her gown, and the dainty modeling of arm and wrist and throat and ear. Then, as she reached a bench and seated herself, she raised her eyes and looked at him. And for the first time in his life he realized that ideal beauty was but the pale phantom of the real and founded on something more than imagination and thought, on something of vaster import than fancy and taste and technical skill. That it was founded on life itself, on breathing, living, palpitating, tremulous life, from which all true inspiration must come. Over and over to himself he was repeating, "Of course, it is perfectly impossible that I can be in love already. Love doesn't happen between 2 ticks of a watch. I am merely amazed at that girl's beauty. That is all. I am merely astounded in the presence of perfection. That is all. There is nothing more serious the matter with me. It isn't necessary for me to continue to look at her. It isn't vital to my happiness if I never saw her again. That is, of course, I should like to see her, because I never did see living beauty such as hers in any woman. Not even in my pictures. What superb eyes! What a fascinatingly delicate nose! What a nose! By heaven, that nose is a nose. I'll draw noses that way in future. My pictures are all out of drawing. I must fit arms into their sockets the way hers fit. I must remember the modeling of her eyelids, too, and that chin, and those enchanting hands." She looked up leisurely from her book, surveyed him calmly, absent-eyed, then bent her head again to the reading. "There is something the matter with me," he thought with a suppressed gulp. If she looks at me again, with those iris-hued eyes of a young goddess, I think I'm done for. I believe I'm done for anyway. It seems rather mad to think it. But there is something the matter." She deliberately looked at him again. "It's all wrong for them to let loose a girl like that on people," he thought to himself. "All wrong. Everybody is bound to go mad over her. I'm going now. I'm mad already. I know I am. Which proves I'm no lunatic. It isn't her beauty. It's the way she wears it. Every motion, every breath of her. I know exactly what her voice is like. Anybody who looks into her eyes can see what her soul is like. She isn't out of drawing anywhere, physically or spiritually. And when a man sees a girl like that, why, there's only one thing that can happen to him as far as I can see. And it doesn't take a year either. Heavens, how awfully remote from me she seems to be. She looked up again, calmly, but not at him. A kindly, grey-whiskered old gentleman came tottering and rocking into view, his rosy, wrinkled face beaming benediction on the world as he passed through it, on the sunshine dappling the undergrowth, on the furry squirrels sitting up on their hind legs to watch him pass, on the stray dickerbird that hopped fearlessly in his path, at the young man sitting very rigid there on his bench, at the fair, sweet-faced girl who met his aged eyes with the gentlest of involuntary smiles. And Carden did not recognize him. Who could help smiling confidently into that benign face, with its gray hair and gray whiskers? Goodness radiated from every wrinkle. "Dr. Atwood," exclaimed the girl softly as she rose to meet this marvelous imitation of Dr. Austin Atwood, the great specialist on children's diseases. The old man beamed weakly at her, halted, still beaming, fumbled for his eyeglasses, adjusted them, and peered closely into her face. "Bless my soul," he smiled. "Our pretty Dr. Hollis." I did not suppose you would remember me," she said, rosy with pleasure. "Remember you? Surely, surely." He made her a quaint, old-fashioned bow, turned, and peeped across the walk at Carden. And Carden, looking straight into his face, did not know the old man, who turned to Dr. Hollis again with many mysterious nods of his doddering head. "You're watching him, too, are you?" he chuckled, leaning toward her. "Watching whom, Dr. Atwood?" she asked, surprised. "Hush, child. I thought you had noticed that unfortunate and afflicted young man opposite." Dr. Hollis looked curiously at Carden, then at the old gentleman with gray whiskers. "Please sit down, Dr. Atwood, and tell me," she murmured. "I have noticed nothing in particular about the young man on the bench there." And she moved to give him room, and the young man opposite stared at them both as though bereft of reason. "A heavy book for small hands, my child," said the old gentleman in his quaintly garrulous fashion, peering with dimmed eyes at the volume in her lap. She smiled, looking around at him. My, he said, tremblingly raising his eyeglasses to scan the title on the page. "Dr. Lamore's famous works. Are you studying Lamore, child?" "Yes," she said with that charming inflection youth reserves for age. "Astonishing," he murmured. "The coincidence is more than remarkable. A physician, and studying Lamore's disease. Incredible. Is there anything strange in that, Dr. Atwood?" she smiled. "Strange?" He lowered his voice, peering across at Carden. "Strange, did you say? Look across the path at that poor young man sitting there." "Yes," she said, perplexed. "I see him." "What do you see?" whispered the old gentleman in a shakily portentous voice. "Here you sit reading about what others have seen. Now what do you see?" "Why, only a man, rather young. No symptoms." "Symptoms? Of what?" The old gentleman folded his withered hands over his cane. "My child," he said, "for a year I have had that unfortunate young man under secret observation. He was not aware of it. It never entered his mind that I could be observing him with minutest attention. He may have supposed there was nothing the matter with him. He was in error. I have studied him carefully. Look closer. Are there dark circles under his eyes? Or are there not?" he ended in senile triumph. "There are," she began, puzzled. But of what interest to me?" "Compare his symptoms with the symptoms in that book you are studying," said the old gentleman hoarsely. "Do you suppose?" she stammered, turning her eyes on Carden, who promptly blushed to his ears and began to fidget. "Every symptom," muttered the old gentleman. Poor young man." She had seen Carden turn a vivid pink. She now saw him fidget with his walking stick. She discovered the blue circles under his eyes. 3 symptoms at once. "Do you believe it possible?" she whispered excitedly under her breath to the old gentleman beside her. "It seems incredible. Such a rare disease. Only one single case ever described and studied. It seems impossible that I could be so fortunate as actually to see a case. Tell me, Dr. Atwood, do you believe that young man is really afflicted with Lamore's disease?" "There is but one way to be absolutely certain," said the old gentleman in a solemn voice. "And that is to study him. Corroborate your suspicions by observing his pulse and temperature, as did Dr. Lamore." "But how can I?" she faltered. He would probably object to becoming a patient of mine." "Ask him, child. Ask him." "I have not courage." "Courage should be the badge of your profession," said the old gentleman gravely. "When did a good physician ever show the white feather in the cause of humanity?" I know, but this requires a different sort of courage." "How?" persisted the old gentleman. "Can you confirm your very natural suspicions concerning this unfortunate young man unless you corroborate your observations by studying him at close range? Besides, already it seems to me that certain unmistakable signs are visible. I mean that strange physical phase which Dr. Lamore dwells on. The symmetry of feature and limb, the curiously spiritual beauty. Do you not notice these? Or is my sight so dim that I only imagine it? He is certainly symmetrical, and, in a certain way, almost handsome in regard to features," she admitted, looking at Carden. Poor boy," muttered the old gentleman, wagging his grey whiskers. "I am too old to help him, too old to dream of finding a remedy for the awful malady which I am now convinced has seized him. I shall study him no more. It is useless. All I can do now is to mention his case to some young, vigorous, ambitious physician, some specialist." "Don't," she whispered almost fiercely, "don't do that, Dr. Atwood. I want him, please. You help me to discover him, you see, and his malady is to be my specialty. Please, do you mind if I keep him all to myself and study him?" "But you refused, child." "I didn't mean to. I didn't exactly see how I was to study him. But I must study him. Oh, I must. There will surely be some way. Please let me." "You discovered him, I admit. But I will promise you faithfully to devote my entire life to studying him, as the great Lamore devoted his life for 40 years to his single patient." "But Dr. Lamore married his patient," said the tracer mildly. That need not be necessary. But if it should prove necessary, you, answer me, child." She stared across at Carden, biting her red lips. He turned pink promptly and fidgeted. "He has got it," she whispered excitedly. "Oh, do you mind if I take him for mine? I am perfectly wild to begin on him." "You have not yet answered my question," said the old gentleman gravely. "Do you lack the courage to marry him if it becomes necessary to do so in order to devote your entire life to studying him?" "Oh, it cannot be necessary. You lack the courage." She was silent. "Braver things have been done by those of your profession who have gone among lepers," said the old gentleman sadly. She flushed up instantly. Her eyes sparkled, her head proudly high, delicate nostrils dilated. "I'm not afraid," she said. "If it ever becomes necessary, I can show courage and devotion, as well as those of my profession who minister to the lepers of Malachi. Yes, I do promise you to marry him if I cannot otherwise study him. And I promise you solemnly to devote my entire life to observing his symptoms and searching for proper means to combat them. My one ambition in life is personally to observe and study a case of Lamore's disease, and to give my entire life to investigating its origin, its course, and its cure." The old gentleman rose, bowing with that quaintly obsolete courtesy which was in vogue in his youth. "I am contented to leave him exclusively to you, Dr. Hollis, and I wish you happiness in your life's work, and success in your cure of this unhappy young man." Hat in hand, he bowed again as he tottered past her, muttering and smiling to himself and shaking his trembling head as he went rocking on unsteady legs out into the sunshine, where the nursemaids and children flocked along the lake shore throwing peanuts to the waterfowl and satiated goldfish. Dr. Hollis looked after him, her small hand buried among the pages of her open book. Carden viewed his disappearing figure with guileless emotions. He was vaguely aware that something important was about to happen to him, and it did before he was prepared. Chapter 23. When Rosalind Hollis found herself on her feet again, a slight sensation of fright checked her for a moment. Then, resolutely suppressing such unworthy weakness, the lofty inspiration of her mission in life dominated her, and she stepped forward undaunted. And Carden, seeing her advance toward him, arose in astonishment to meet her. For a second they stood facing each other, he astounded, she a trifle pale but firm. Then in a low voice she asked his pardon for disturbing him. "I am Rosalind Hollis, a physician," she said quietly. and physicians are sometimes obliged to do difficult things in the interest of their profession. It is dreadfully difficult for me to speak to you in this way. But, she looked fearlessly at him, I am confident you will not misinterpret what I have done. He managed to assure her that he did not misinterpret it. She regarded him steadily. She examined the dark circles under his eyes. She coolly observed his rising color under her calm inspection. She saw him fidgeting with his walking stick. She must try his pulse. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions in the interest of science? She said earnestly. As a matter of fact, he stammered, I don't know much about science. Awfully glad to do anything I can. You know. Oh, I don't mean it that way, she reassured him. A hint of a smile tinted her eyes with brilliant amethyst. Would you mind if I sat here for a few moments? Could you overlook this horrid unconventionality long enough for me to explain why I have spoken to you? I could indeed, he said, so anxiously cordial that her lovely face grew serious and she hesitated. But he was standing aside, hat off, placing the bench at her disposal, and she seated herself, placing her book on the bench beside her. Would you mind sitting here for a few moments? She asked him gravely. Dazed, scarcely crediting the evidence of his senses, he took possession of the end of the bench with the silent obedience of a schoolboy. His attitude was irreproachable. She was grateful for this, and her satisfaction with herself for not having misjudged him renewed her confidence in him, in herself, and in the difficult situation. She began, quietly, by again telling him her name and profession, where she lived, and that she was studying to be a specialist, though she did not intimate what that specialty was to be. Outwardly composed and attentively deferential, his astonishment at times dominated a stronger sentiment that seemed to grow and expand with her every word, seizing him in a fierce possession absolutely and hopelessly complete. The bewildering fascination of her mastered him. No cool analysis of what his senses were confirming could be necessary to convince him of his condition. Every word of hers, every gesture, every inflection of her sweet, clear voice, every lifting of her head, her eyes, her perfectly gloved hands, only repeated to him what he knew was a certainty. Never had he looked upon such physical loveliness. Never had he dreamed of such a voice. She had asked him a question, and, absorbed in the pure delight of looking at her, he had not comprehended or answered. She flushed sensitively, accepting his silence as refusal, and he came out of his trance hastily. I beg your pardon, I did not quite understand your question. Miss Hollis. I mean, Dr. Hollis. I asked you if you minded my noting your pulse, she said. He stretched out his right hand. She stripped off her glove, laid the tip of her middle finger on his wrist, and glanced down at the gold watch which she held. I am wondering, he said, laughing uncertainly, whether you believe me to be ill. Of course it is easy to see that you have found something unusual about me, something of particular interest to a physician. Is there anything very dreadful going to happen to me, Dr. Hollis? I feel perfectly well. Are you sure you feel well? She asked, so earnestly that the smile on his lips faded out. Absolutely. Is my pulse queer? It is not normal. He could easily account for that, but he said nothing. She questioned him for a few minutes, noted his pulse again, looked closely at the bluish circles under his eyes. Naturally, he flushed up and grew restless under the calm, grave, beautiful eyes. I have an absolutely new and carefully sterilized thermometer. She drew it from a tiny gold-initialed pocket case and looked wistfully at him. You want to put that into my mouth? He asked, astonished. If you don't mind. She held it up, shook it once or twice, and deliberately inserted it between his lips. And there he sat, round-eyed, silent, the end of the thermometer protruding at a rakish angle from the corner of his mouth. And he grew redder and redder. I don't wish to alarm you, she was saying, but all this is so deeply significant, so full of vital interest to me, to the world, to science. What have I got, in heaven's name? He said thickly, the thermometer wiggling in his mouth. Ah, she exclaimed with soft enthusiasm, clasping her pretty ungloved hands. I cannot be sure yet. I dare not be too sanguine. Do you mean that you want me to have something queer? He blurted out, while the thermometer wiggled with every word he uttered. And no, of course, I don't want you to be ill, she said hastily. Only, if you are ill it will be a wonderful thing for me. I mean, that I am intensely interested in certain symptoms which... She gently withdrew the glass tube from his lips and examined it carefully. Is there anything the matter? he insisted, looking at the instrument over her shoulder. She did not reply. Pure excitement rendered her speechless. I seem to feel all right, he added uneasily. If you really believe that there's anything wrong with me, I'll stop in to see my doctor. Your doctor, she repeated, appalled. Yes, certainly. Why not? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Why I discovered this case. I beg you most earnestly to let me observe it. You don't understand the importance of it. You don't begin to dream of the rarity of this case. How much it means to me. He flushed up. Do you intend to intimate that I am afflicted with some sort of rare and strange disease? He stammered. I dare not pronounce upon it too confidently, she said with enthusiasm. I have not yet absolutely determined the nature of the disease. But, oh, I am beginning to hope. Then I am diseased, he faltered. I've got something anyhow. Is that it? Only you are not yet perfectly sure what it is called. Is that the truth, Miss Hollis? How can I answer positively until I have had time to observe these symptoms? It requires time to be certain. I do not wish to alarm you, but it is my duty to say to you that you should immediately place yourself under medical observation. You think that? I do. I am convinced of it. Please understand me. I do not pronounce upon these visible symptoms. I do not express an unqualified opinion, but I could be in a position to do so if you consent to place yourself under my observations and care. For these suspicious symptoms are not only very plainly apparent to me, but were even noted by that old gentleman whom you may perhaps have observed conversing with me. Yes, I saw him. Who is he? Dr. Austin Atwood, said the girl solemnly. Oh, and you say he also observed something queer about me? What did he see? Are there spots on me? Am I turning any remarkable color? Am I? And in the very midst of his genuine alarm, he suddenly remembered the makeup box and what the tracer of lost persons had done to his eyes. Was that it? Where was the tracer, anyway? He had promised to appear. And then Carden recollected the gray wig and whiskers that the tracer had waved at him from the cupboard, bidding him note them well. Could that beaming, benignant, tottering old gentleman have been the tracer of lost persons himself? And the same instant Carden was sure of it, spite of the miraculous change in the man. Then logic came to his aid, and, deducing with care and patience, an earnest conviction grew within him that the dark circles under his eyes and the tottering old gentleman resembling Dr. Austin Atwood had a great deal to do with this dreadful disease which Dr. Hollis desired to study. He looked at the charming girl beside him, and she looked back at him very sweetly, very earnestly, awaiting his decision. For a moment he realized that she had really scared him, and in the reaction of relief an overwhelming desire to laugh seized him. He managed to suppress it, to compose himself. Then he remembered the tracer's admonition to acquiesce in everything, do what he was told to do, not to run away, and to pay his court at the first decent opportunity. He had no longer any desire to escape. He was quite willing to do anything she desired. Do you really want to study me, Dr. Hollis? He asked, feeling like a hypocrite. Indeed I do, she replied fervently. You believe me worth studying? Oh, truly, truly, you are. You don't suspect. You cannot conceive how important you have suddenly become to me. Then I think you had better take my case, Dr. Hollis, he said seriously. I begin now to realize that you believe me to be a sort of freak, an afflicted curiosity, and that, in the interest of medicine, I ought to go to an asylum or submit myself to the ceaseless observation of a competent private physician. I think it best for you to place yourself in my care, she said. Will you? Yes, he said, I will. I'll do anything in the world you ask. That is very, very generous, very noble of you, she exclaimed, flushing with excitement and delight. It means a great deal to me. It means, perhaps, a fame that I scarcely dared dream of even in my most enthusiastic years. I am too grateful to express my gratitude coherently. I am trying to say to you that I thank you, that I recognize in you those broad, liberal, generous qualities which, from your appearance and bearing, I thought perhaps you must possess. She colored again very prettily. He bowed, and ventured to remind her that she had not yet given him the privilege of naming himself. That is true, she said, surprised. I had quite forgotten it. But when he named himself she raised her head, startled. Victor Carden, she repeated. You are the artist, Victor Carden. Yes, he said, watching her dilated eyes like two violet-tinted jewels. For a minute she sat looking at him, and imperceptibly a change came into her face, and its bewildering beauty softened as the vivid tints died out, leaving her cheeks almost pale. "It is a pity," she said under her breath. All the excitement, all the latent triumph, all the scarcely veiled eager enthusiasm had gone from her now. "A pity?" he repeated, smiling. "Yes. I wish it had been only an ordinary man. Why should this happen to you? You have done so much for us all, made us forget ourselves in the beauty of what you offer us. Why should this happen to you? But you have not told me yet what has happened to me, Miss Hollis." She looked up, almost frightened. "Are you our Victor Carden? I do not wish to believe it. You have done so much for the world. You have taught us to understand and desire all that is noble and upright and clean and beautiful, to desire it, to aspire toward it, to venture to live the good, true, wholesome lives that your penciled creations must lead to wear such beautiful bodies and such divine eyes. Do you care for my work?" he asked, astonished and moved. Yes, of course I do. Who does not?" "Many," he replied simply. "I am sorry for them," she said. They sat silent for a long while. At first his overwhelming desire was to tell her of the deception practiced upon her. But he could not do that, because in exposing himself he must fail in loyalty to the tracer of lost persons. Besides, she would not believe him. She would think him mad if he told her that the old gentleman she had taken for Dr. Atwood was probably Mr. Keene, the tracer of lost persons. Also, he himself was not absolutely certain about it. He had merely deduced as much. "Tell me," he said very gently, "what is the malady from which you believe I am suffering?" For a moment she remained silent. Then, face averted, laid her finger on the book beside her. "That," she said unsteadily. He read aloud, "Lamour's Disease. A treatise in 16 volumes by Earl S. Lamour, M.D., M.S., F.B.A., M.F.A. "All that?" he asked guiltily. "I don't know, Mr. Carden. Are you laughing at me? Do you not believe me?" She had turned suddenly to confront him, surprising a humorous glimmer in his eyes. "I really do not believe I am seriously ill," he said, laughing in spite of her grave eyes. "Then perhaps you had better read a little about what Lamour describes as the symptoms of this malady," she said sadly. "Is it fatal?" he inquired. "Ultimately. That is why I desire to spend my life in studying means to combat it. That is why I desire you so earnestly to place yourself under my observation and let me try. Tell me one thing," he said. "Is it contagious? Is it infectious? No? Then I don't mind your studying me all you wish, Dr. Hollis. You may take my temperature every 10 minutes if you care to. You may observe my pulse every 5 minutes if you desire. Only please tell me how this is to be accomplished. Because, you see, I live in the Sherwood Studio building, and you live on Madison Avenue. I have a ward, a room, fitted up with every modern surgical device, every improvement," she said. "It adjoins my office. Would you mind living there for a while, say for a week at first, until I can be perfectly certain in my diagnosis? Do you intend to put me to bed?" he asked, appalled. "Oh, no. Only I wish to watch you carefully and note your symptoms from moment to moment. I also desire to try the effects of certain medicines on you." "What kind of medicines?" he asked uneasily. "I cannot tell yet. Perhaps antitoxin. I don't know. Perhaps formalin later. Truly, Mr. Carden, this case has taken on a graver, a more intimate significance since I have learned who you are. I would have worked hard to save any life. I shall put my very heart and soul into my work to save you, who have done so much for us all." The trace of innocent emotion in her voice moved him. "I am really not ill," he said unsteadily. "I cannot let you think I am. Don't speak that way, Mr. Carden. I am perfectly miserable over it. I don't feel any happiness in my discovery now, not the least bit. I had rather live my entire life without seeing one case of Lamour's disease than to believe you are afflicted with it. But I'm not, Miss Hollis. Really, I am not." She looked at him compassionately for a moment, then rose. "It is best that you should be informed as to your probable condition," she said. "In Lamour's works, Volume 9, you had better read exactly what Lamour says. Do you mind coming to the office with me, Mr. Carden? Now?" "Yes. The book is there. Do you mind coming?" No, of course not. And, as they turned away together under the trees. "You don't intend to begin observing me this afternoon, do you?" he ventured. "I think it best if you can arrange your affairs." "Can you, Mr. Carden?" "Why, yes, I suppose I can. Did you mean for me to begin to occupy that surgical bedroom at once? Do you mind? And no, I'll telephone my servants to pack a steamer trunk and send it around to your apartment this evening." "And where am I to board?" "I have a dining room," she said simply. "My apartment consists of the usual number of servants and rooms, including my office, and my observation ward which you will occupy." He walked on, troubled. "I only want to ask one or two things, Dr. Hollis. Am I to be placed on a diet? I hate diets." "Not at once. May I smoke?" "Certainly," she said, smiling. "And you won't put me, send me to bed too early?" "Oh, no. The later you sit up the better, because I shall wish to take your temperature every 10 minutes and I shall feel very sorry to arouse you." "You mean you are coming in to wake me up every 10 minutes and put that tube in my mouth?" he asked, aghast. "Only every half hour, Mr. Carden. Can't you stand it for a week?" "Well," he said, I suppose I can if you can. Only, upon my honor, there is really nothing the matter with me, and I'll prove it to you out of your own book." "I wish you could, Mr. Carden. I should be only too happy to give you back to the world with a clear bill of health if you can convince me I am wrong. Do you not believe me? Indeed, I am not selfish and wicked enough to wish you this illness, no matter how rare it is. The rarer a disease is, the madder it makes people who contract it," he said. "I should be the maddest man in Manhattan if I really did have Lamour's malady. But I haven't. There is only one malady afflicting me, and I am waiting for a suitable opportunity to tell you all about it." "But, tell me now," she said, raising her eyes to his. "Not now. Tonight." "I hope so. I will if I can, Miss Hollis. But you must not fear to tell a physician about anything which troubles you, Mr. Carden." "I'll remember that," he said thoughtfully, as they emerged from the park and crossed to Madison Avenue. A moment later he hailed a car and they both entered. Chapter 24. No, there could be no longer any doubt in her mind as she went into her bedroom, closed the door, and, unhooking the telephone receiver, called up the great specialist in rare diseases, Dr. Austin Atwood, M.S., F.B.A., M.F.H. "Dr. Atwood," she said with scarcely concealed emotion, "this is Dr. Rosalind Hollis." "How to do?" squeaked the aged specialist amiably. "Oh, I am well enough, thank you, doctor, except in spirits." "Dr. Atwood, you were right. He has got it, and I am perfectly wretched." "Who has got what?" retorted the voice of Atwood. "The unfortunate young gentleman we saw today in the park." "What park?" "Why, Central Park, doctor. Central Park. I haven't been in Central Park for 10 years, my child." "Why, Dr. Atwood, is this Dr. Austin Atwood with whom I am talking?" "Not the least doubt. And you are that pretty Dr. Hollis, Rosalind Hollis, who consulted me in those charity cases, are you not?" "I certainly am. And I wanted to say to you that I have the unfortunate patient now under closest observation here in my own apartment. I have given him the room next to the office. And, doctor, you were perfectly right. He shows every symptom of the disease. He is even inclined to sentimentalism. He begins to blush and fidget and look at me in that unmistakable manner. Not that he isn't well-bred and charming. Indeed, he is most attractive, and it grieves me dreadfully to see that he already is beginning to believe himself in love with the first person of the opposite sex he encounters. I mean that I cannot mistake his attitude toward me, which is perfectly correct, only one cannot avoid seeing the curious infatuation." "What the dickens is all this?" roared the great specialist, and Dr. Hollis jumped. "I was only confirming your diagnosis, doctor," she explained meekly. "What diagnosis?" "Yours, doctor. I have confirmed it, I fear, and the certainty has made me perfectly miserable, because his is such a valuable life to the world, and he himself is such a splendid, wholesome, noble specimen of youth and courage, that I cannot bear to believe him incurably afflicted." "Good heavens!" shouted the doctor. "What has he got and who is he?" "He is Victor Carden, the celebrated artist, and he has Lamour's disease," she gasped. There was a dead silence. Then, "Keep him there until I come. Chloroform him if he attempts to escape." And the great specialist rang off excitedly. So Rosalind Hollis went back to the lamplit office where, in a luxurious armchair, Carden was sitting, contentedly poring over the 9th volume of Lamore's great treatise and smoking his second cigar. "Dr. Atwood is coming here," she said in a discouraged voice, as he rose with alacrity to place her chair. "Oh, what for?" "To see you, Mr. Carden." "Who? Me? Great Scott! I don't want to be slapped and pinched and polled by a man. I didn't expect that. You know, I'm willing enough to have you observe me in the interest of humanity. But, Mr. Carden, he is only called in for consultation. I have a dreadful sort of desperate hope that perhaps I may have made a mistake, that possibly I am in error." "No doubt you are," he said cheerfully. "Let me read a few more pages, Dr. Hollis, and then I think I shall be all ready to dispute my symptoms, one by one, and convince you what really is the trouble with me. And, by the way, did Dr. Atwood seem a trifle astonished when you told him about me?" "A trifle? Yes," she said uncertainly. "He is a very, very old man. He forgets. But he is coming." "Oh, and didn't he appear to recollect seeing me in the park?" "And not clearly. He is very old, you know. But he is coming here." "Exactly, as a friend of mine puts it," smiled Carden. "May I be permitted to use your telephone a moment?" "By all means, Mr. Carden. You will find it there in my bedroom." So he entered her pretty bedroom and, closing the door tightly, called up the tracer of lost persons. "Is that you, Mr. Keene? This is Mr. Carden. I'm head over heels in love. I simply must win her, and I'm going to try. If I don't, if she will not listen to me, I'll certainly go to smash. And what I want you to do is to prevent Atwood from butting in. Do you understand?" "Who?" "Yes, Dr. Austin Atwood. Keep him away somehow." "Yes, I'm here, at Dr. Hollis's apartments, under anxious observation. She is the only woman in the world. I'm mad about her, and getting madder every moment. She is the most perfectly splendid specimen of womanhood." "What? Oh, yes. I rang you up to ask you whether it was you in the park today, that old gentleman." "What?" "Yes, in Central Park." "Yes, this afternoon." "No, he didn't resemble you, and Dr. Hollis took him for Dr. Atwood." "What are you laughing about?" "Oh, I can hear you laughing. Was it you?" "Oh, what do I think? Why, I don't know exactly what to think, but I suppose it must have been you." "Was it?" Oh, I see. You don't wish me to know." "Certainly, you are quite right. Your clients have no business behind the scenes. I only asked out of curiosity." "All right. Goodbye." He came back to the lamplit office, which was more of a big, handsome, comfortable living room than a physician's quarters, and for a moment or two he stood on the threshold, looking around. In the pleasant, subdued light of the lamp, Rosalind Hollis looked up and around, smiling involuntarily to see him standing there. Then, serious, silent, she dropped her eyes to the pages of the volume he had discarded, Volume 9 of Lamore's great works. Even with the evidence before her, corroborated in these inexorably scientific pages which she sat so sadly turning, she found it almost impossible to believe that this big, broad-shouldered, attractive young man could be fatally stricken. Twice her violet eyes stole toward him, twice the thick lashes veiled them, and the printed pages on her knee sprang into view, and the cold precision of the type confirmed her fears remorselessly. The trained scrutiny of the observer will detect in the victim of this disease a peculiar and indefinable charm, a strange symmetry which, on closer examination, reveals traces of physical beauty almost superhuman. Again her eyes were lifted to Carden, again she dropped her white lids. Her worst fears were confirmed. Meanwhile he stood on the threshold looking at her, his pulses racing, his very soul staring through his eyes, and, within him, every sense clamoring out revolt at the deception, demanding confession and its penalty. "I can't stand this," he blurted out, and she looked up quickly, her face blanched with foreboding. "Are you in pain?" she asked. "No, not that sort of pain. Won't you please believe that I am not ill? I'm imposing on you. I'm an imposter. There's nothing whatever the trouble with me except something that I want to tell you, if you'll let me." "Why should you hesitate to confide in a physician, Mr. Carden?" He came forward slowly. She laid her small hand on the empty chair which faced hers, and he sank into it, clasping his restless hands under his chin. "You are feeling depressed," she said gently. Depression was a significant symptom. 3 chapters were devoted to it. I'm depressed, of course. I'm horribly depressed and ashamed of myself, because there is nothing on earth the matter with me, and I've let you think there is. She smiled mournfully. This was another symptom of a morbid state. She turned, unconsciously, to page 379 to verify her observation. See here, Miss Hollis, he broke out. Haven't I any chance to convince you that I am not ill? I want to be honest without involving a friend of mine. I can't endure this deception. Won't you let me prove to you that these symptoms are only significant of something else? She looked straight at him, considering him in silence. Let us begin with those dark circles under my eyes, he said desperately. I found some cold cream in my room and, look, they are practically gone. At any rate, if there is a sort of shadow left, it's because I use my eyes in my profession. Dr. Lamore says that the dark circles disappear. Anyway, said the girl, unconvinced. Cold cream had nothing to do with it. But it did. Really it did. And as for the other symptoms, I can't help my pulses when you touch me. Please, Mr. Carden, I don't mean to be impertinent. I'm trying my hardest to tell the truth. And my pulses do gallop when you test them. They're galloping now. This very moment. Let me try them, she said coolly, laying her hand on his wrist. Didn't I say so? He insisted grimly. And I'm turning red, too. But those symptoms mean something else. They mean you. Mr. Carden, I can't help saying so. I know it, she said soothingly. These sentimental outbursts are part of the disease. Good heavens. Won't you try to believe me? There's nothing in the world the matter with me except that I am, perfectly fascinated. You must struggle against it, Mr. Carden. That is only part of the... It isn't. It's your mere presence, your personality, your charm, your beauty, your loveliness, Mr. Carden, I beg of you. It is part of my duty to observe symptoms. But you are making it very hard for me, very difficult. I am only proving to you that it isn't Lamore's disease which does stunts with my pulses, my temperature, my color. I'm not morbid except when I realize my deception. I'm not depressed except when I think how far you are from me, how far above me, how far out of reach of such a man as I am, how desperately Don't you think I had better administer a SS sedative, Mr. Carden, she said, distressed. I don't care. I'll take anything you give me, as long as you give it to me. I'll swallow pint after pint of pills. I'll Fletcherize I'll luxuriate in poison, anything. She was hastily running through the pages of the 9th volume to see whether the symptoms of sentimental excitement ever turned into frenzy. What can you learn from that book? He insisted, leaning forward to see what she was reading. Anyway, Dr. Lamore married his patient so early in the game that all the symptoms disappeared. And I believe the trouble with his patient was my trouble. She had every symptom of it until he married her. She was in love with him. That is absolutely all. Rosalind Hollis raised her beautiful, incredulous eyes. What do you mean, Mr. Carden? I mean that, in my opinion, there's no such disease as Lamore's disease. That young girl was in love with him. Then he married her at last, and, presto, all the symptoms vanished. The pulse, the temperature, the fidgets, the blushes, the moods, the whole business. What about the strangely curious manifestations of physical beauty, superhuman symmetry, Mr. Carden? Do you notice them in me? He gasped. Yes, in a modified measure. In me? Certainly, she said firmly, but the slow glow suffusing her cheeks was disconcerting her. Then his own face began to reflect the splendid color in hers. Their eyes met, dismayed. There are 16 volumes about this disease, she said. There must be such a disease. There is, he said. I have it badly, but I never had it before I first saw you in the park. Mr. Carden, this is the wildest absurdity. I know it. Wildness is a symptom. I'm mad as a hatter. I've got every separate symptom, and I wish it was infectious and contagious and catching and fatal. She made an effort to turn the pages to the chapter entitled Mayonnaise and Illusions, but he laid his hand across the book and his clear eyes defied her. Mr. Carden, her smooth hand trembled under his. Then, suddenly nerveless, relaxed. With an effort she lifted her head, Their eyes met, spellbound. "You have every symptom," he said unsteadily. "Every one. What have you to say?" Her fascinated eyes held his. "What have you to say?" he repeated under his breath. "You, with every symptom, and your heavenly radiant beauty to confirm them. That splendid youthful loveliness which blinds and stuns me as I look, as I speak, as I tell you that I love you. That is my malady. That is the beginning and the end of it. Love." She sat speechless, immovable, as one under enchantment. "All my life," he said, "I have spent in painting shadows. But the shadows were those dim celestial shapes cast by your presence in the world. You tell me that the world is better for my work, that I have offered my people beauty and a sort of truth, which they had never dreamed of until I revealed it. Yet what inspired me was the shadow only, for I had never seen the substance. I had never believed I should ever see the living source of the shadows which inspired me. And now I see. Now I have seen with my own eyes. Now the confession of faith is no longer a blind creed, born of instinct. You live. You are you. What I believe from necessity I find proved in fact. The occult no longer can sway one who has seen. And you, who, without your knowledge or mine, have always been the one and only source of any good in me or in my work. Why is it strange that I loved you at first sight, that I worshipped you at first breath? I, who, like him who raises his altar to the unknown God, raised my altar to truth and beauty, and a miracle has answered me." She rose, the beautiful dazed eyes meeting his, both hands clasping the 9th volume of Lamour's great monograph to her breast as though to protect it from him who was threatening her, enthralling her, thrilling her with his magic voice, his enchanted youth, the masterful mystery of his eyes. What was he saying to her? What was this mounting intoxication sweeping her senses, this delicious menace threatening her very will? What did he want with her? What was he asking? What was he doing now, with both her hands in his, and her gaze deeply lost in his, and the 9th volume of L'Amour on the floor between them, sprawling there, abandoned, waving its helpless, discredited leaves in air, discredited, abandoned, obsolete as her own specialty, her life's work. He had taken that, too, taken her life's work from her. And in return she was holding nothing, nothing except a young man's hands, strong, muscular hands which, after all, were holding her own imprisoned. So she had nothing in exchange for the 9th volume of L'Amour, and her life's work had been annihilated by a smile, and she was very much alone in the world, very isolated and very youthful. After a while she emerged from the chaos of attempted reflection and listened to what he was saying. He spoke very quietly, very distinctly, not sparing himself, laying bare every deception without involving anybody except himself. He told her the entire history of his case, excluding Mr. Keene in person. He told her about his aunt, about his birthday, about his determination to let the legacy go. Then in a very manly way he told her that he had never before loved a woman, and fell silent, her hands a dead weight in his. She was surprised that she could experience no resentment. A curious inertia crept over her. She was tired of expectancy, tired of effort, weary of the burden of decision. Life and its problems overweighted her. Her eyes wandered to his broad young shoulders, then were raised to his face. "What shall we do?" she asked innocently. Unresisting, she suffered him to explain. His explanation was not elaborate. He only touched his lips to her hands and straightened up, a trifle pale. After a moment they walked together to the door and he took his hat and gloves from the rack. "Will you come tomorrow morning?" she asked. "Yes, come early. I am quite certain of how matters are with me. Everything has gone out of my life, everything I once cared for, all the familiar things. So come early, for I am quite alone without you. And I without you, Rosalind." "That is only right," she said simply. "I shall cast no more shadows for you. Are you going?" "Oh, I know it is best that you should go, but—" He halted. She laid both hands in his. "We both have it," she faltered, "every symptom. And you will come early, won't you?" The end. Thank you for listening to the complete audiobook of The Tracer of Lost Persons by R.W. Chambers. I hope you enjoyed this journey into mystery and intrigue as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and sharing it with others who might enjoy it too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more timeless classics and engaging stories from the world of literature. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the story? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you once again for your support, and I'll see you in the next audiobook adventure.